All right, guys, we're back for week 10 of the week by week head coach game breakdown episodes. I'm here with Yanni. What's up, dude?
What is going on, buddy?
I'm taking my victory lap after my massive win over you last week in League One, the most important league to me. I'm gonna flash the screen up, or flash the score up on the screen. Complete domination from Kareem Hunt and Jalen Warren. I have no idea how that happened. I think your team was better, but the season's still alive.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're both live to make the playoffs in that league. Like
Yeah.
if you play Adrian this week, and it sounds like he's not gonna have Bucky, so I feel
Yeah.
like you win that game, and then if that other guy, the Jamar Chase team, falls off too, we could be live for the 5 and 6 seed in there. But anyways, that's enough about that. Let's get into it. Here are the buys this week. The Dallas Cowboys, Cincinnati Bengals, the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Tennessee Titans are on bye. We have three atrocious defenses that aren't going to be playing this week, so you can't scam your way to points as easily. But don't worry, there are still plenty of terrible teams on the board. And I feel like it's a good segue into the Thursday night game. I'll take this one. We got the Las Vegas Raiders going into Denver to play the Broncos. The Raiders have an implied team total of 17 points here, and the Broncos have an implied team total of 25 and a half points. For the Raiders, we're going to start Ashton Genty this week, and my king, Brock Bowers. My draft him anytime he's there in the second or third round king, Brock Bowers. That finally looked good last week. We're going to sit the Raiders wide receivers and Geno Smith. No, thank you. And for the Broncos, we're going to start Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton, Troy Franklin, and J.K. Dobbins. We're going to sit Evan Ingram, who goosed last week, and we're going to tricky decision R.J. Harvey. And let's start with the Raiders first. I feel like this is a much easier conversation to have, right? Having full health Brock Bowers back in the offense, I think, really makes a big difference. We saw it last week. Geno Smith, he looked closer to Seahawks Geno to me than the Raiders Geno we've seen pretty much all year. 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Granted, it was against a bad Jaguars defense, and I am saying it's a bad Jaguars defense. But Bowers is a no-brainer here. He's clearly like the engine of the offense. 13 targets last week. Points are going to be harder to come by against the Denver Broncos. There is no mistake about that. But it seems like the Raiders are running into tight end the entire time. They healthy scratched both of their rookie wide receivers. Like basically, Brock Bowers is just a wide receiver in this offense, and we don't have faith that the Raiders can sustain more than one pass catcher, especially with Jacoby Myers getting traded out of town. It feels like that's the direction they're going. Brock Bowers probably my tight end one rest of season. There could be some debate on that depending on how much you like Trey McBride or Tyler Warren, for example. But even in the toughest matchup in this week, elite tight end one. Then Genty. It's interesting. We had there was like some reporter this week like asking Chip Kelly about Ashton Genty's usage, about why he's not getting used more, and Chip Kelly goes, "Yeah, we don't do things like for fantasy managers, but I'm pretty sure he has the most carries and yards of any rookie running back in the NFL this year." That is true. Ashton Genty leads the all NFL rookies in yards and carries right now. I didn't think that was the case. I think Cam Scadaboo going down has something to do with it. Marion Hampton going down has something to do with it. But the fact of the matter is, the usage is really good for him. I do worry that he's kind of like a cupcake crusher at this point, where like the Raiders line is so bad that when they play like legitimate D lines, that Genty has no room and just gets crunched behind the line of scrimmage. The Broncos fit into that good defensive line and good defense category, but anywhere from 20 to 22 opportunities a week in an offense that feels very consolidated. We'll start him this week. For me, he's more of like an RB2 though than an RB1. We're sitting the wide receiver in Geno. I feel like with Brock Bowers healthy, it opens it up a little bit for more of these guys to get opportunity, but we're not attacking the Broncos matchup even without Sertan. I mean, Trey Tucker is effectively their wide receiver one now. If you're not counting Bowers, like I'm not itching to get Trey Tucker in my starting lineup here. It feels like you're chasing a low point total to 17 implied team total. I feel like that's probably pretty accurate. We're going to sit him this week, but that doesn't mean that there'll just be sits in perpetuity. I think there will be weeks you can pick your spots with them. For the Broncos, Bo Nix, to me, what I've seen from him this year is way worse than what I was expecting coming into the year. Like I wasn't drafting Bo Nix anywhere really in fantasy because I liked other options around him, but it just the play on the football field has really been staggeringly bad to me. At this point, he kind of fits, and this is going to sound crazy, he kind of fits into that Justin Fields category of fantasy quarterback to me, where I'm only interested in starting him in plus matchups. Good news for him is this Raiders defense is a plus matchup. So I think he's like a low end quarterback one to mid range quarterback one this week. But if you're a Bo Nix roster for fantasy and he's your quarterback, I would try and get a second one on your roster so that way you can kind of pick and choose your matchups a little bit more. Just a little alarm going off for me with Bo Nix. Cortland Sutton, he's still a start for me. I feel like it's a good buy low window for him. Last week he only had one catch for 30 yards and a touchdown, so because of the nature of the catch, he got you home. But it's felt bad. But to me, it feels like Bo Nix clearly prefers Cortland Sutton, and I know that probably sounds crazy given that Troy Franklin I think had like 12 targets last week, but the Broncos were playing the Houston Texans. Sutton had the Derek Stingley matchup. We've told you guys all year, hey, this is like a premium corner. He's gonna make your matchups a lot harder when you're like D'd up on him, right? Like Mike Evans when he was healthy got shut down by Stingley. Stingley's done a really good job. I feel like the Raiders they don't have Derek Stingley. That's the good news. So I prefer Cortland Sutton to Troy Franklin this week, but I think you can start them both. Given Franklin's increase in target share, more involvement in the offense, it feels like he's very clearly the wide receiver two here. So you can start him, I think, pretty confidently in this matchup. Then J.K. Dobbins, him and RJ Harvey will kind of do these together, right? It's starting to get a little weird to me. RJ Harvey has had 3 weeks in a row now where he's played pretty well. I think Dobbins is like single digits in those 3 weeks too. So it's getting kind of close to me, but Dobbins is still getting the volume. I believe RJ Harvey leads all running backs in like fantasy points per touch this year, which is kind of crazy. So he's clearly explosive. I think that coming into the offseason, we were talking about how or I guess Sean Payton was talking about how Evan Ingram was going to be the Joker in the offense, right? I don't think that materialized, but I think that RJ Harvey is actually the Joker in this offense. So kind of with all three of them, right? We're going to start J.K. Dobbins here because of the volume, but he's on thin ice to me. RJ Harvey is a tricky decision because he's not getting the volume, but he's been explosive with his opportunity. I think against a Raiders defense that's not very good, you can try and chase that, and I actually think it's not the worst flex in the world. And then Evan Ingram, we're going to sit him because he's not the Joker. He goosed last week, and it just feels like he's such like a I don't know. He's like an afterthought in the offense. I feel like it's definitely not what we drafted. Searching for that late tight end value, it just feels like to me, Evan Ingram's almost a drop to me. Honestly, I don't know. What do you think, Yanni? Is Evan Ingram like a drop to you? Drop
He's
candidate?
100% a drop. When I had on both my Bowers rosters, as I was running through tight end or whatever, like I ran him for a week and dropped him right away. It just wasn't good. No, he's not rosterable in 12 team non tight end premium. No way. No.
Right.
And then just one quick note about Dobbins Harvey, because like I really loved Harvey as a prospect coming out, and then I sort of stopped. I didn't really draft him in the 5th or 6th round because I was worried about Dobbins. Like I'll get really excited about Harvey when the usage fundamentally changes. He's only getting like 2 or 3 carries a game, and then like 3 or 4 or 5 targets a game. Like he's got some gadgety stuff, and it's really cool. I believe he has 4 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. So like that's exciting. It's exciting to see what he could do if Harvey were not in front of him, or if Dobbins were not in front of him. I just think Dobbins is going to remain in front of him while healthy. But like where I'll get really excited and start to be full blown into Harvey to me is like if I see a 15 touch game and Dobbins is healthy and they just opt to see what Harvey can do with a full workload. They're not really doing that yet.
Mm-hmm.
But he's fine. He's a good flex. He's like a guy I want rostered, especially because you have genuine league winning upside there. If Dobbins went down and then all of a sudden you're throwing Harvey in your flex, like I have a roster that has Rashee Rice, Nico Collins, Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Quinshon Judkins, Tyler Warren. Like if I can take that roster and all of a sudden throw an RB1 RJ Harvey in the flex, like you're probably going to win a championship, right? So like he's that kind of guy to me, but to me he's nothing more than a really fancy handcuff plus. But I'll get excited if something really changes with the usage.
All righty.
Also, I'm surprised you didn't mention it, but it should be mentioned how excited you were about Brock Bowers, that you gave people full permission to trade any tight end in the league for him last week. And really, for 2 or 3 weeks, that was probably a good call, man. Like, just figured you deserve your credit for that.
It was
I wish.
shocking to me how late he was going in drafts, right? Like I was out in the first round because I'm just never procedurally I'm
Yeah,
never taking a tight end in the first round, but like there was like a tier of guys like it was um London, Puka, you got like Jonathan Taylor, Jacobs,
yeah,
Bucky, Chase
yeah.
Brown, and then I was going like Bowers. I was hammering him like it mid like to the end of the second round, and then I saw in drafts like people were letting him drop to the third. I thought that was insane value. So it's nice to have those shares finally be live.
The 2 shares of him I got were in the third, the early third at the 2-3 turn. So we'll see how the year goes on. Falcons, and this is a team that I have a lot of stake in. I was hammering Bijan whenever I got the second or third pick and he was there. So I have a lot of Bijan shares in redraft. And then an underdog. I was so confident, maybe mistakenly so. I guess we'll have to see how the season plays out. I was so confident in Drake London with year 2 Michael Penix. Like I think I have 33% roster exposure or 36% roster exposure to Drake London in the second round. So I'm really happy to at least see that part of it maybe coming around. We'll see what happens this week. He had his first game with double-digit targets with Darnell Mooney active. So we'll see. Falcons with an implied team total of 21, but it's a European game, and they just got Sauce Gardner. They face the Colts. They face the Colts in, where is this one, in Spain?
Germany.
Germany. Actually, that's awesome. The German crowd's awesome. But they're facing the Colts in Germany with an implied team total of 27.5. For the Falcons, you're going to start Bijan. I know he's had a couple down weeks. It has affected me. I promise if you guys are feeling it, I'm feeling it too with the Bijan slump. But I think he's going to be just fine. I just think their offense, especially with Jake Matthews being a little unhealthy, had like a rough patch. Drake London. So it's really interesting. We had sort of this pontification on here 2 weeks ago, back and forth about, I don't understand why, if a team can force feed a stud like the way that the Bengals have with with Jamar Chase, why don't they do that more with these teams where it seems to me that the Falcons run better when they're force feeding Drake London? Like that just seems to be their way to explosive offense. We finally got it last week with Darnell Mooney healthy. And he goes and puts out the wide receiver 1 overall week, and I believe the 3rd biggest game of the season for any fantasy asset. He has been the wide receiver 1 overall in 30% of his games with Michael Penix. So out of the 10 games he's played with Michael Penix, 3 of them he has been the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy. I'm salivating at the idea that he's going to continue getting that workload moving forward. I don't know how realistic that is. And especially not against Sauce Gardner. I don't think we're going to get that this week, but it is really exciting. Just as someone who, like, Drake London's maybe one of my favorite players in the league. It was really exciting to see last week, and maybe we're in for a pretty crazy second half of the season if he really does go 10 to 15 targets a game here on out. I don't know if we get that or not, and I don't think we get it against Sauce Gardner here. And then Pitts has just been getting enough of a role that, like, I think he's a startable tight end. I don't think it's flashy. I don't think it's exciting. If he gets a touchdown, though, it's going to be a high-end tight end 1 week. But he has a floor. That's like what a lot of tight ends don't have, is they'll put him out wide and run slant routes with him. Seems like he has a good chemistry with Penix. It seems like Penix really is inclined to find him. And insofar as Sauce Gardner is going to shadow Drake London this week, Pitts may be their second most reliable passing option because Mooney's just had a really down year. I don't know if the hamstrings, he like went off and on the injury report with hamstrings. He had the shoulder injury coming into the year. I don't know if at some point with the soft tissue injuries in the shoulder, like it just takes a toll on him. Mooney has not looked like himself, so he's going to be a sit for us this week. And I think you want to keep him rostered, but I think until something really changes, he's just a sit until further notice. He had a game without Drake London against a really soft defense. He wasn't able to do anything. And then your sort of tricky decisions, Michael Penix Jr. I know with some key teams on bye, some key quarterbacks on bye, people were looking for streamers. I think you can do a little better, and we'll list a little bit better options down the road or down the slideshow here. But Penix is fine. I think, like, he's going to have to pass a lot. I just also, like, I don't know if I want to test this new look Colts defense with Michael Penix on their first week out there. I mean, Sauce Gardner is maybe not, like, the force of nature that you would think 2 first-round picks and a player get traded for. He's still like one of the few players in NFL history to go all pro his first 2 years in the league. Like he's a damn good player, and his body type, like what he has problems with are super good athletes that can get behind him, that can run past him. That's not really Drake London. Drake London's like a plotter and a possession guy. Like that's a pretty perfect matchup for Sauce. So like I don't know if this is going to be a game that's ripe for passing with Penix. And again, I do think that forces volume to Bijan and Pitts. So for the Colts, Daniel Jones, excellent start here. I know this is a pretty good defense, one of the better DVOAs in the league. I think you kind of have to start Danny Dimes until something really changes. I know he had a rough game, really effed me in the betting picks, but I think he still had like 18 points last week. That's fine. Michael Pittman Jr. looks like he might not go this week. More to come on that later. If he goes, he's going to get the AJ Terrell matchup. I think you kind of have to start him because he's been so good all year. But I would expect more like mid-range to low-end wide receiver 2 production, not the mid-range to high-end wide receiver 1 production we've been getting out of him so far. Jonathan Taylor, first bad game of the year. Doesn't matter. Don't care. He's going to be back. He's going to kill it. That's what he does. Tyler Warren, kind of hitting a little bit of his rookie slump. I think he's had like 7 and 5 points the last 2 weeks. Things are slowing up just a little bit for him, right? He's starting to get the trials and tribulations, the bumps and bruises that go along with developing in the NFL. It just is what it is. I believe their bye is next week. I think they could use the rest. I think he's going to be just fine, but he's certainly not producing as the top 1 or 2 tight end that you were getting for chunks of this year, especially not with Brissett launching McBride to the moon and now Bowers back. Still a top 5 guy. You're still starting him every week. And then for Pierce and Downs, who are sort of tricky decisions with the Colts, it's sort of interesting. I think Pierce got 13 targets last week, and I went around and like I need some streamers this week. I have banged up rosters. There's buys. I have a ton of George Pickens, a ton of Rashee Rice, so I'm like missing wide receivers that I would normally be starting. I went around and looked for Downs and Pierce. Like I think both of them are low-end flexes with Pittman in there because they have the capacity to catch a big ball or break one off. But like with Pitts out, they become must-start flexes to me. And just in general, they're getting a lot of volume. Like this offense is actually it's just a healthy offensive environment. I wonder if teams are going to start really focusing on stopping the run and going, we'll let Daniel Jones drop back 35, 40 times and beat us with his arm before we let him turn around and hand it off to Jonathan Taylor. That makes sense to me, right? And also the Falcons defense can do it, man. They can play a physical brand of football. I just think there's going to be enough volume there and enough high scoring, pretty healthy game total in the week, 48.5. Assuming the European time change and travel doesn't get to them, that like both of these guys are on our radar as sort of tricky decisions.
Yeah, totally agree on Pierce and Downs. I'm hammering them this week if Pittman misses. Then for the Falcons, Drake London. I feel like we're finally starting to see like kind of what we were going for at the beginning of I guess at the 1-2 turn, right? I saw Drake London going 12 overall in some drafts.
Yeah.
I get a little worried just because of Michael Penix and what he's able to do, right? Like you said, Drake London, I think he has 3 wide receiver 1 finishes on the year or 2.
No, he has 3 wide receiver 1 overall, the wide receiver 1 in 10
Yeah.
starts with.
Yeah, that's what I mean, right? Like, so when I was looking at his box score, it's like either he is the wide receiver 1 overall or like the wide receiver 35 to 40. And I wonder how much of that is just because Penix blows sometimes, right? I'm still very confused on Michael Penix as a player. I don't know if he's good or not. He has these flashes where he looks really good and then he just lays these eggs. I'm willing to chalk it up to rookie growing pains, right? This is effectively his rookie season. He only got 3 games last year, which I'm not really counting. So I think room to grow. If you can trade, I would say it's probably going to be really hard to trade for Drake London right now. But if he has one of these down weeks against Sauce Gardner, I would be pulling the trigger, especially with the trade deadline coming. I would try and get him on your team just because that wide receiver 1 overall upside, like I don't think anyone has hit those numbers like as regularly as him. So you have to deal with some variance, but still a very good player. I like seeing that, the potential that we were drafting finally come through.
What he's a good lesson in is if you're going to chase these boomer bust guys, I would say AJ Brown isn't far behind him. He's a little bit worse, obviously, of a fantasy asset. But at least when these guys boom, it's like a week winning boom, like when AJ Brown goes off, it's for 25, 30, 35 points. And when Penix goes off or when London goes off, it's for like 35, 40 points. At least if you're going to chase someone who's boom or bust, chase someone who, when they boom, is winning you weeks and you're scoring like I had 170, 180. I've had a 165 point week on my Penix team or on my London teams this year. And it's like, yeah, that's what, if I'm going to go after boom or bust, it needs to be boom or bust, like league altering, you know?
All right, next one. We
Oh,
got
no,
the
you get the Collins slide. Go ahead.
Yeah, we,
Sorry.
we get the fraudulent, completely fraudulent Jacksonville Jaguars, exposed 5-3 Jaguars going to Houston to play the Texans. The Jaguars have an implied team total of 18 points, and the Texans have an implied team total of 19.5 points. Vegas says there's not going to be a ton of scoring here. I tend to agree with them. For the Jaguars, we're going to start Travis Etienne and Parker Washington this week for the Jaguars. That's where we're at in the season. And we're going to sit the Prince that was promised, Trevor Lawrence, a.k.a. he's ass, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jacoby Myers. He's new to the team, but we're not going to start him this week against the Houston Texans. Then for the Texans, we're going to start Nico Collins. And we're going to sit Woody Marks, Nick Chubb, and Christian Kirk. And let's start with the Texans here first. Yanni, I'm immediately going to ask you this question because I think I missed this in pre-show. If Nick Chubb does not go, is Woody Marks a tricky decision or a full-blown start for you?
Yeah, tricky decision. Closer to a start for me. I just, with Davis Mills out there, if they're splitting a backfield in a game with a projected 37.5 team total, I'm just going to go ahead and avoid it. But yes, if Marks gets full run, he gets enough of the passing work, and Mills should have to dump off enough that, yeah, I think you're starting him.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it makes sense, like given the point total, right? I was actually kind of excited about Marks, even if Chubb was playing, and now that I saw that he popped up, I was like, oh, like this could
Yeah,
be a really
dude.
good Woody Marks spot.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with those Texans, right? We just did Marks and Chubb. Nico Collins, it's going to be tough out there with Davis Mills. The biggest neck in the NFL is going to be the quarterback this week. But historically, Nico Collins has had his best games against the Jaguars. The Jaguars are not a good defense. I believe they're bottom 5 in passing yards allowed. So in theory, they are very gettable. It's just going to be whether or not Davis Mills can get the ball to Nico Collins. But it seems very clear the Texans are willing to force feed Nico when CJ is not there. Nico's a good player. The Jaguars don't really have any lockdown cover guys, so like I'm willing to start him this week. I'm not gung ho about it. If you're expecting 9 catches for a $120 and a touchdown, I don't think it's gonna be like that. I think to me he's more of like a solid wide receiver too this week. Maybe that's controversial. I think I'm lower on Collins than the market, but I think he's still startable. This is not a spot that we're sitting him even with Davis Mills out there. And then Christian Kirk, are we chasing secondary options in the Houston Texans passing offense with Davis Mills? I don't think so. There may be other weeks where one of these wide receivers pops up, but until CJ's out there, this is not going to be it. Then for the Jaguars, so there's a lot of things going on here, right? The Texans, again, elite defense. I think that Houston has like a Super Bowl level defense, and they just need a competent offense, and they could really make a run. But that's just not what they have, right? So you have the Jacksonville Jaguars who have just looked weird for a couple weeks now on offense, going against an elite unit, right? So we're trying to get whatever value we can out of here. Travis Etienne is going to be a start for us. Pre-show I said to me he's closer to a tricky decision than a start, but I think it's debatable, right? Etienne got 5 goal line carries last week. It feels like it's very solidly him is the starting running back here, and Bashal Tutin is more of like a complementary piece. I know that Bashal Tutin got in the end zone and Etienne didn't last week. I think that's just like it just happens sometimes. Good players get vultured sometimes. To me, Etienne's like a flex play. I wouldn't be stoked about it going up against this fierce defense, but he's a starting running back in the NFL. I think it's fine. Then Parker Washington, we've kind of memed on this guy at points in the year, right? When Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Hunter were out there, we were saying like, when you have BTJ and Travis Hunter, we got to find a way to get Parker Washington involved, right? Because he was having weeks where he was getting more targets than those two anyways. Now with the Travis Hunter meniscus and Brian Thomas has now picked up a high ankle. He didn't practice this week. I'm assuming he's not going, right? So really what's happening here is Parker Washington has somehow backed his way into the primary pass catcher for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think that pie is going to be worth a ton this week, but I think you're live to get anywhere from 7 to 10 targets, and maybe he gets in the end zone if Trevor throws a touchdown. He was a waiver pickup this week. a lot of people were not excited about it anymore once the Jaguars traded for Jacoby Myers. You know, they've said themselves that Myers isn't ready for slot work yet. He's only going to be on the outside. That means he'll probably get Stingley. It feels like Parker Washington has a road here for at least 1 week to scam his way to some points, you know, especially with the bye weeks, right? If you're missing a Rashee Rice, like, and you're desperate, you can have Parker Washington out there. I think he's live anywhere from 8 to 10 points. I think he'd be fine. Trevor Lawrence, he's just looked terrible to me. Like, he's looked really, really bad, and this is about as bad of a matchup defensively as you can have. You're missing your top two pass catching options, or maybe at least top one with Brian Thomas. I don't know where Travis Hunter falls in that equation, but you're missing guys. You got a tough defense. The guy throws a lot of picks. Like, it feels like most of Trevor's value, at least for fantasy this year, has been in his legs. Like, all of his like nice 20-point games have been like as a result of quarterback rushing touchdowns. Like, I don't know, man. It's like 37 and a half implied total in the game. It feels like there's going to be a lot of running the ball. It feels ugly to me. Feels like Trevor's live to throw a pick or two here. I would look elsewhere if you can. In the one league I have Trevor in Superflex, I'm starting Aaron Rodgers this week over Trevor. So that's where I'm at with it. What do you think, man? Ugly game, huh?
Ugly game, ugly for fantasy assets too. Like, I don't know if I'm thrilled about any of them. To me, it's just as simple as ETN got 22 carries, 5 inside the 5-yard line, and 5 targets last week, 27 opportunities. Like, that was against the Raiders too, where like they were actually chasing points. It was a neutral game script or chasing the whole game. Like, to me, it's just that's high end wide receiver or running back one usage. What is it worth in the offensive context, especially without BTJ and Hunter? I don't know. I just feel like you kind of can't sit that, especially in the current running back market. And then Parker Washington it's 19 targets over the last 2 weeks. This is Liam Cohen's slot receiver. That's a really valuable role. It just is what it is. Like, and it's actually shocking that Hunter didn't do more with that role in the beginning of the year. I have a roster that has been decimated. I've lost it's like Cam Scattaboo and Tucker Kraft and O'Marion Hampton, and I am currently rolling out Parker Washington at wide receiver 2, and I'm flexing Mark Andrews in that league. So that's where I'm at, man. That's where I'm at in my year.
I got to push back a little bit. I am excited about one start in this game. The
Okay.
Texans, DST. Love it.
Yeah.
Love the spot for
Yeah.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That correct, sir. That is correct. Giants at the Bears, actually kind of exciting just to see, like, does Jackson Dart go up here and cause some problems for the Chicago Bears, who I've seen their fans like talking trash on Twitter about their record this week, which is fascinating to see. The Giants with a 21.5 implied team total, going to Chicago with a 26-point implied team total at home, getting 4.5 points at home. For the Giants, Jackson Dart has been the quarterback 5 since week 3. So, like, he is, and this is a soft matchup. To me, it's like Jackson Dart is more or less a must-start quarterback unless you have a way better option. You know, like, I have a roster that's Drake May and Jackson Dart. Sure, I'm going to start Drake May over him. But, like, I don't know how you would either have had to just pick him up to hold him and see what happens, and maybe you're going to use him on bye weeks or whatever, injury insurance, and maybe that's why you're not starting him. But, like, I think you should be starting Jackson Dart. His rushing floor is tremendous. I think last week he had 51 yards and a rushing score against the 49ers. And through the air, he's been competent. If Darius Slayton holds onto the ball, he had a nice long touchdown last week. The Bears are missing 4 members of their secondary. Like, this, it's a good matchup for Dart, actually, in a lot of ways, and they should have to keep passing the ball because the Bears should score points here. Darius Slayton, therefore, is going to be one of our favorite streamers for the week, like, by far. Again, I have rosters where, like, my entire receiving core is injured or on bye this week. Like, I'm talking 4 or 5 guys that are out. I grab Darius Slayton all over. He will be plugged into my running wide receiver 2 or my flex spot where I need him. Look, if you're going to stream a waiver wire fodder, again, one, he probably should have had like a 15 or 16 point half PPR week if he could have held onto the ball last week. But 2, like, dude, the Chicago Bears cannot stop a nosebleed, especially in the passing game right now. Like, I think we're live here for a nice ceiling game out of Slayton. And worst case scenario, he'll get you your 7 to 8 half PPR, and he's not going to kill you on the week. So roll out Darius Slayton, Theo Johnson. I forget. I think their backup tight end's Bellinger. Bellinger was injured last week. Theo Johnson did catch the touchdown against the 49ers. He's just getting pretty good target volume. I know he's only averaging like 3 catches a week. But I think, like, in a matchup like this, Yeah, I think he's a perfectly fine tight end streamer, so I'm rolling him out there as a start. Or in DFS. Like, if you guys are rolling DFS, it would be so dirt cheap to get Jackson Dart, Slayton, and Theo Johnson, as Theo Johnson is one of your wide receivers, obviously. And if you put those three in there, you can put an insane roster around them. I love that move this week. Last week, I had Caleb Johnson or Caleb Williams stacked with Colston Loveland on all my rosters, and that absolutely smashed. For your sits, you're going to sit Singletary, and you're going to sort of tricky decision Tyron Tracy Jr. That was more of I kind of twisted Ted's arm. Ted pointed out their usage has not been that different here. My feeling is that Tyrone Tracy Jr. still gets the passing work. And frankly, like, he already beat out a 1 year younger Devin Singletary. Like, as athletes, I don't see them as anywhere close to one another. I would assume that Devin Singletary is the better pass blocker. Maybe that's why they have a little bit of an affinity for him in the coaching staff. Because, like, I don't see anything with how they play that means they should be splitting playtime, at least based on the eye test. So, like, I feel like Tracy's still the guy to own here, and I feel like Tracy's still the guy I want to start. Like, I will be flexing him this week. I don't have much of a choice in that league, but I'm flexing him. It was a close decision between him and Parker Washington, but I need the ceiling, not the floor there. So I am going to go ahead and roll Tracy, even though he's a sort of tricky decision. We have Washington as a start. And the only reason is because of the uncertainty of the usage with Singletary. If he comes out and gets 70% of the work in this matchup, like, I think he'll absolutely smash. Chase Brown just had a running back 1 week last week. So it's only usage. And if he does not get usage here, if they come out and they're 55-45 or 51-49, something like that, I think I may have blown $58 of fab for a busted pick, unfortunately. I went in on, like, one of my most stacked rosters, and I dropped $58 of fab. And then I immediately built a package around Rico Dowdle, Omarion Hampton, and Kamani Vidal for Jahmyr Gibbs. So maybe I'll feel a little silly about doing that. I thought I had running back depth with Tracy Jr. I don't know. I still think he's the guy to own there. And then for the Bears, a little bit to get into here with their backfield. We'll leave that for last. Caleb Williams is a start here. Caleb Williams is a can crusher in fantasy. If he has a good matchup, like, I'm going to go ahead and roll him out with confidence. If he has a tough matchup, I'm going to go ahead and sit him. That is just the way you need to play Caleb Williams as a fantasy asset. Will he have a 37-point week ever again in his life? I would be, maybe not in his life, but I would be surprised if he has another one this year. Pretty unique circumstances that lead to you getting a receiving touchdown. Actually, a lot to talk about here, God. Okay, so Loveland. Loveland had a breakout game last week. It was when Cole Kmet left early with an injury. I saw people dropping up to like 50 or 60% of their, like, $50 or $60 out of 100 fab on the year in him in leagues. I think that was probably a little aggressive. I'd like to see what it looks like when Kmet's back, but I also think there's a point at which the genie cannot go back in the bottle. What I had envisioned with Loveland and why I was taking him in underdog, he runs these really cool, like, short option routes that you saw in college where he would, like, post up on the guy and cut in and cut out, or, like, use his footwork. He has these really nice, like, what I was calling safety blanket routes with Caleb Williams. I thought he was going to be like their guy that they relied on to move the sticks, keep the offense on schedule, because his footwork and his body work was so good in close, particularly in the red zone too. We're starting to see that where, like, he's lining up in the slot and he's getting option routes to run with Caleb. And, like, him and Caleb seem like they have a degree of a mind meld going, at least the last week. We saw the first of it last week. I would love to see it continue. If he comes out and does it again, like, we might be looking at a mid-range tight end one moving forward. Laporta broke out in the second half of the season after Hawkinson was out of the way for the Lions under Ben Johnson. And, like, you saw what the ceiling is with Colston Loveland. To me, it would be clinically insane to go back to Olamide Zaccheaus or Cole Kmet absorbing volume. But we kind of need to wait and see. You do want to wait and see. I'm starting him this week. I have Kelsey on bye. I picked him up in a few leagues where, like, I'm running 2 tight end. We'll see. But yeah, he's a start here. Odunze he's been the wide receiver, I think 58 for the last 3 weeks. He went from being the wide receiver 9 or 10 for the first 4 weeks of the season to the wide receiver 58 coming out of their bye. He's dropped 3 touchdowns in that time. Not good. The changes in the offense that have gone on in that time period have been extremely rush heavy. They've been running the shit out of the ball. The drops really affect it. But what I'm looking at here is he's still running as their clear X receiver. He is leading the NFL in separation. It's like he has 50.4%. I forget what the metric's called, but he was at 50.4%. The next closest was JSN at 43 or 41%. The next closest was at 30 or 32%. Like, dude, this is a guy who, as far as a separator and route runner, is establishing himself as one of the best in the entire league. Caleb needs to get him the ball, and he needs to hold on to the ball when it gets there. He is dropping touchdowns. Like that's a real. His dad's been on Twitter flaming the Bears this week. I don't know if anyone's seen that. It's been kind of funny. Like, it's, to me, it's also on Odunze. Like, he's not holding on to the ball. He should have had 2 or 3 touchdowns the last few weeks, which would have at least put him as a wide receiver 2 in that time. So again, I'm willing to plant some flags here because I did on Odunze as a draft pick and in the first month of the season. Like, if they don't turn this thing around, the New York Giants are like a team where you should turn things around. If we don't see it turn around here, I will officially be very concerned about Odunze. Still going to rate him as a high-end wide receiver 2 for this week. DJ Moore is going to be a sort of tricky decision, by the way. He's actually scored similarly to Odunze coming out of their bye and since their bye. And then for the backfield, we're going to have Monungai as a sort of tricky decision. Swift as a start. Swift got in a limited practice today. It looks like he's going to go. I don't know why they would have him run a limited practice if he wasn't going to go. I know they tried out 4 running backs. That caused some consternation amongst Swift investors. I don't think, unless I saw him, if they signed a running back or if they start elevating guys off the practice squad, then maybe I'll be more concerned. We're treating this like Swift is going. He's going to be a start if he goes. And then Monungai is actually going to be a low-end flex. Even if Swift goes, like, if you really need a start for this week, I think you're totally fine flexing Monungai against the Giants. They are one of the bottom 3 rushing defenses in the league. We just saw Brian Robinson Jr. go for like 10 or 11 half PPR and Christian McCaffrey go for whatever he went for, something ridiculous against him. So yeah, that's your breakdown of the game. I'm really curious. Again, like, I'm sort of like a peripheral Bears fan, meaning I'm just rooting for the project. I love Ben Johnson. I love watching him do their thing. I love just the offense in general is really fun to me. I hope they keep it going. I do think it's interesting to see how they handle their first kind of stumble here with like Odunze's dad trashing the team. And obviously that would imply to me that Odunze isn't thrilled. How do they balance going forward with Swift and Monungai? Does DJ Moore finally pop off at some point this year? We're all kind of waiting, and then does Colson level and hang on to his job? There's actually a lot of good storylines here for it being kind of a lackluster game on paper.
It would shock me if Rome Odunze is not thrilled. Because that meme where there's like the fat guy who's like at the end of the pipe, and then there's the starving child. Like, it feels like early on in the season that was Rome Odunze and DJ Moore, right? And now we're seeing the Bears like really commit to the running attack, which has been great for me for fantasy. And Odunze's he's had opportunity too, and he's blown it. So I just don't, DJ Moore hasn't blown his opportunities. I don't know. I agree with you that he's still a wide receiver too this week for me because I think the matchup is good, and I think that I think Caleb is live to just completely donut in weeks where he's playing competent defenses. This is not one of those though. Both these teams promising offenses and dumpster trash defenses, so should be good for fantasy. Swift Monungai, I worry that this thing is gonna start to be unusable, given how good Monungai was last week. I feel like we'll see. Swift was good before he missed last week, so hopefully he kind of holds on to the work, and we have a more clear 1 and 2. Just because, like, if you have Kyle Monungai, obviously you want him to get the ball more, right? But it feels like, especially with this year, how many split backfields we've been dealing with, I think this thing is live to turn into like a weird 50-50 thing, and the Bears' really nice schedule ends in 3 weeks. Then they finish with the Packers twice, and I forgot the other team, but like the last 3 weeks in fantasy playoffs is going to be hard for them.
It's like San Francisco and Denver. It's not good.
Yeah, so potential trade high candidates, depending on which guys you have. Then for the Giants, my only real note on this, right? Like Dart, I think that he's just I think Dart is like a great player, right? That's all I really have to say about that. I think he's a franchise quarterback locked in. The Tracy usage to me is really, really weird, considering he beat out Singletary last year, right? So I don't understand the fascination with going back to like a weird 50-50. I'm on board with you. It looks so fishy to me that I'm sounding the alarms if it is not primarily Tracy this week. If Singletary remains more involved, then It's just not what we were getting production wise when Scat was in there for sure. All right, this should actually be a pretty interesting game. We got the Ravens going into Minnesota to play the Vikings. The Ravens have an implied team total of 26.5 points here, and the Vikings have an implied team total of 22 points. For the Ravens, we're starting Lamar, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, and Mark Andrews, and we're going to sit Isaiah Likely and Rashad Bateman. And then for the Vikings, well, boys. Maybe we were a little too hasty on JJ McCarthy. Big win last week against the Detroit Lions. I saw those locker room videos of him in there with Kevin O'Connell. He looks like a bit of a psycho. I like it. And we're going to fire him up here. We'll talk about it more in a little bit, but I think he's like a low end quarterback one this week, but still, maybe he's better than we thought. We're also starting Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones. We're going to sit Jordan Mason here. Then we're going to tricky decision TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. And let's start with the Vikings here because I think is actually a pretty fascinating conversation, right? I think a lot of pieces have moved around. So JJ McCarthy, his volume is still not very high, right? And his production isn't like he's not Sam Darnold from last year, at least at this point. But he's been effective running the football. He has the rushing upside. He's been. It looks like he's more willing to give the ball to Jefferson in the red zone, which Justin Jefferson managers have desperately needed. The Ravens have played pretty good defense against the quarterback for over the last 3 weeks, right? Tua had a rough one against him. Caleb had a rough one against him, so they're kind of on a heater here. It just feels like with the rushing upside in the complete body of the Ravens' defensive work, it feels like a good spot here, especially with guys like Justin Jefferson and Addison out wide. I think you can do it this week, but it's a risky pick. But I lean towards starting him. Justin Jefferson, again, it's a no-brainer. The talent, I think he's like a top 2, 3 wide receiver in the league. Obviously, he hasn't really been that in fantasy this year because it's been like a tale of two. I don't know, two different portions of the season, right? He has more touchdown equity. It feels like with JJ McCarthy, but he hasn't been getting in the yards. And then when Carson Wentz was in there, he was getting a ton of yards, but then Jordan Addison was vulturing all of the touchdowns, right? It's ultimately resulted in anywhere from like 10 to 14 points a week. I'm still waiting for the breakout. I'm optimistic about the breakout because JJ has again only started 3 games in his career, so this is effectively his rookie season. These guys take a little bit to get going. We have a Kevin O'Connell offense. The Vikings really kind of put their foot down in being all in on JJ McCarthy. To me, Justin Jefferson, he's like a wide receiver 1 to I think at worst he'd be a high end wide receiver 2, but mostly wide receiver 1. Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. This is an interesting conversation because it's completely flipped to me. Jordan Mason, he had a good run where when Aaron Jones was not out there, where Mason was like in your lineups every week, but I believe Aaron Jones has outscored Jordan Mason every single week. JJ McCarthy has been the starter. He looks like he's getting more of the rushing work as well as passing work. They're still splitting up like the pie a little bit, but I would prefer Aaron Jones's piece of the pie here for sure. So he's going to be a start for us. He's more like a low end running back too to flex to me, but I think you can do it this week. And Jordan Mason, it's just the role isn't there for him anymore, really. I still like the player. I still think he's a very good backup, one of the best backups in the league, but I think he's just a backup at this point. And then Hawkinson and Addison, tricky decisions. Again, at least so far from what we've seen with JJ McCarthy, the passing yards pie is a lot smaller, right? Jordan Addison has he's really been a great like 7th, 8th round pick if you had him. But last week we saw, hey, he didn't get the yards or the touchdowns, and he got you like I don't know, like 7, 8 points, something like that. It wasn't great. It feels like with the smaller piece of the pie, if Justin Jefferson's finally going to score more touchdowns, maybe this isn't the week you attack it, but you could. He's an explosive player. He can break off long ones. Definitely like one of the better wide receiver 2s in the league, but I'm just not sure if I want to chase it this week with JJ and his 3rd start ever. Then TJ Hawkinson, I mean, he's like a low end tight end 1 to maybe tight end 2 to me this week. The pie is just smaller. I think he got a touchdown last week. It resulted in like 10 points. He just really has been anywhere between 4 to 10 points on a weekly basis. I feel like the ceiling isn't there for where you were drafting him, but still, you could consider him. I think if you have like, I don't know, Travis Kelce on bye. I actually see TJ Hawkinson on waivers in a lot of places. I don't know. I don't think he should be on waivers, but you could this week. For the Ravens, I feel like this is more standard, right? As it turns out, the offense looks entirely different with Lamar Jackson in there. I feel like people were kind of expecting a slower week from Lamar coming off the injury. He just came out and threw 4 touchdowns and dominated the Dolphins. Granted, it is the Dolphins, but the Vikings is like a step up in defensive tiers that he's playing, but I don't care, man. It's Lamar Jackson, elite quarterback one this week. Yeah, I think he's like in the top 3 or 4 for me. I know the Vikings did a good job against Goff last week. Lamar is not Jared Goff. Derrick Henry is also going to be a start. He had 100 scoreless yards against the Dolphins, so he didn't really pop off like maybe we were hoping he would. Or for me, I was happy he didn't because I was playing a Derrick Henry team. But you know, the Vikings as a whole still have had trouble stopping the run this year. He's finally getting more usage. It feels like the Ravens are going to start being ahead in games, which is prime time for Derrick Henry. He's not going to come off the field for Justice Hill in negative game scripts. So RB1 for me this week, no problem. Zay Flowers and Mark Andrews, they just become infinitely more startable when Lamar Jackson is your quarterback. Zay Flowers, again, is just dominating target share. I understand that he has not had those boom weeks yet. That's kind of the player he's been his entire career, but I am interested in chasing Lamar Jackson passing in this game. I think Zay Flowers, wide receiver two, like he's probably like a mid-range wide receiver too, but I really like the start this week. I think he looks pretty good. And then Mark Andrews, I mean, he has 2 weeks where he's like been a top 3 or 2 tight end. I know he has one tight end, one finish on the year. Only 2 targets last week, 2 catches, 2 touchdowns. The volume has not been where it is. I think he's lost a step as a player, but Lamar looks for him in the end zone. As long as the touchdown equity remains, I think he's a fine tight end start this week. Then Isaiah Likely's a sit. I wanted to put him on the radar, though. I think you're a lunatic if you're starting Isaiah Likely in this matchup, but he had double the targets of Mark Andrews last week, 60 yards. I think that with Lamar in there, you're going to be able to start more of these other passing option guys. So I would keep Likely stashed if you got him. I think there's a good chance he's going to be startable by the end of the year. Then Rashad Bateman, it's too boomer bust for me. His volume isn't really there. It feels like this is more of a Flower spot than a Bateman spot for me. A lot of talking. I feel like that was an interesting one, though. A lot of things to talk about. What do you think, Yanni?
Yeah, so Lamar only threw 18 completions last week, so that's part of the issue. Is like 5 of them went to Flowers. It just what there wasn't the volume there, and then Flowers got caught on the shoestring tackle inside the 10 in a matchup. I had the Flowers and Lamar stack going in 3 leagues, and he got caught with a shoestring tackle inside the 10-yard line, which just killed me. So like if he catches that touchdown, that was a low end wide receiver 1 week or like very high end wide receiver 2 week, and he still caught 30% of Lamar's completions, or 26%, 27% went to Zay Flowers. So like if they get in a game where they have to really pass it, I think he's going to be just fine. And Andrews is like a gross start, dude. I am not thrilled. 2 different craft rosters because I have Lamar. I just went and got Andrews, and that's who I'm going to roll with for the rest of the season. It's a gross start. It really is. It's just he is around like I think he's at 9.8, 9.7 points per game in games Lamar's gone, and that's including a 1 and a 0.9 point game. He's still around 9.7. I just like to me at tight end, that's just going to be what it is. And he's touchdown dependent. And when he doesn't get the touchdown, he's going to bust your week like every other tight end. But at least he is averaging almost 10 points in half PPR. And when he spikes, it is like a week that swings your week. And he has the easiest schedule for tight end rest of season. So, and I do think you should stash Isaiah Likely. I think that's a great stash. Okay, Browns at Jets. The Jets are all of a sudden a matchup we will be targeting on fantasy, which is pretty surprising to say. The Browns with a 20-point implied team total going to MetLife Stadium with an implied team total of 17.5 for the home team Jets. For the Browns, there's not a whole lot to say here. big Q as a smash start. He's like going to be a smash start all the way until week 17. He has just great matchups for the most part. I saw him popping up on a lot of sell lists because of the offense overall not being a great one. To me, they're so committed to him, and he's looked so good, and he gets such good volume and such good red zone usage. I could not imagine trading Quentin, the big Q Quinshon. I would have to get a really nice offer for him. Yeah, man. To me, it's I think he's a lot closer to a running back 1 than a running back 2 at this point. I was really surprised to see the fantasy community's takes on him the last couple of weeks. I would have been trying to buy low all during the bye week. I would still send out some last minute offers this week. He's a smash start. The Browns wide receivers, you can't start any of them. Nothing to say. And the Browns tight ends. I wish it was one tight end. I wish Fannin or Njoku could just go ahead and take over the role. Fannin's outscored him most weeks, but it's not enough, they're still both basically in the tight end 13 to 15 range, most weeks when they finish, and it's really frustrating, and they're not pushing forward. Just is what it is. We were all hoping Njoku would get traded. He also hasn't been totally healthy. Fannin had a mini breakout while he wasn't healthy, but does that continue? I don't know. I prefer Fannin to Njoku. I'm rostering Fannin in one league. Again, though, it's not a thrilling thing. It's a touchdown dependent tight end. That's just the nature of it if you don't have one of those better starts. And then for the Jets, Breece Hall did not get traded, shockingly. I like him with Tyrod Taylor or Justin Fields going forward. I think he had his first explosion week last week. That's really good. The target volume is really healthy. I just kind of think we know what we're getting with Breece. You're getting a guy with the upside to win you weeks, and he's going to have a good floor every week. I don't know. I feel good rostering Breece Hall. I'm not worried about it. I saw some some in the fantasy community were pretty bummed. I am surprised that the Chiefs offered a 4th and then wouldn't offer a 3rd for Breece Hall. To me, that's bizarre with the state of the Chiefs the way they are, that they weren't willing to give up a pick 30 spots higher for him, but they weren't. And then Garrett Wilson is practicing this week. I believe they said the plan is for him to get back this week. He gets the Ward matchup, which isn't ideal. I just think with how good Garrett Wilson has looked for most of this year, he was a wide receiver 1. I'm going to start him if he's playing a football game. That's just the way it is with Garrett Wilson for me. Probably not the best matchup coming off an injury. Temper your expectations. Closer to a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1. But the rest of the year, it looks pretty good. The coast is clear for him to go off. And then we're going to sit Fields. I would assume they're going to roll with Fields after he got the team the first win of the season before their bye week. I just have no interest against the Browns. Start, like Ted said, right? You start them against bad defenses, sit them against good ones, get another tight end, stream one off the waiver wire. If J.J. McCarthy's on your wire, go get him. Anything like that. I would be starting J.J. McCarthy. I would rather start, I'm looking through our list here. I would rather start Michael Penix for sure over Fields. I would rather start Mac Jones at the Rams over Fields.
Aaron Rodgers over Fields.
I would start Aaron Rodgers over Fields this week pretty easily. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Mason Taylor, who had a good week with old Fieldsy boy last week before the bye. We know about the vaunted post bye rookie bump. So do they get him more incorporated going forward? He looks like a good player to me, not transcendent or anything. I don't think he's a game breaking tight end. I don't even think he's a Darren Waller level athlete. It's nothing like that. He just is a really fundamentally sound tight end that seems to have a feel for where to sit in coverage. And if it's not Garrett Wilson, they need a second guy to move the sticks. And it seems like he's just working underneath. I've seen a few plays where Justin Fields is ready to break the pocket or run. Instead, he dumps it off to him, basically. I like Mason Taylor a lot. I think he should be rostered in leagues. I think he's a great tight end, too, to rotate in good matchups. If you think the Ward matchup weighs really heavily here and Wilson's coming off an injury, then maybe he's closer to a start for you. To us, he's a tricky decision. I think you can do a little bit better. I probably still prefer Fannin. I would prefer Fannin over him, but they're very similar ranges. They're those tight end 2s that will have tight end 1 weeks. If he were to get a little more consistent, he may be a tight end 1. He's right there, though. Good player, but I don't know if I'm forcing him in my lineup this week.
Yeah, I actually just dropped Mason Taylor for Colston Loveland. I thought you were going to be going for Colston Loveland. I was going to send you an insulting trade offer. But yeah. it didn't work out that way, though. I just want to say this. Garrett Wilson has been awesome this year. I think that if you are a Garrett Wilson manager, though, you have to be willing to take these weeks where he just has an awful week, maybe 1 or 2 points, because the Jets can do nothing, right? Offensively.
Yep.
especially with Justin Fields. Like Justin Fields is, I look at my first read, either that guy's open or I scramble, right? And Garrett Wilson's great, a great athlete. He's a great player. There's a reason the Jets said he's the only thing that's untouchable on their team, right? But he is just such a victim of what they're rolling out there that you just need to be willing to deal with the variance, right? To me, Garrett Wilson's like in the AJ Brown or Devontae Smith archetype of player, where significantly better NFL player, I think, the fantasy asset, and they're going to be spotty. But be patient with Garrett Wilson. If he has like a 1 or 2 pointer, that doesn't mean banish him to your bench forever. That's really all I have to say on the game, really, right? Like with the Jets trading Quinn and Williams and Sauce, smash spot for the big Q. Oh, you know what?
Oh,
I do have this to say about the big Q. If you want to like build the argument why he's a sell high, you can say that it's because he's the Browns version of Derrick Henry. And when they get down, the Browns have been throwing it like 50 times with Dylan Gabriel and getting like Dylan Sampson in there, right? Like I'm not as worried about it at all, really. I think the big Q is such like a centerpiece of the offense that he's just going to be the engine that runs this thing, especially in plus matchups. Definitely not a fan of Dylan Gabriel. I think the Browns have their problems, but yeah, I'd be pricing the big Q somewhere in between wide or running back 2 or running back 1.
dude, the Browns aren't a fan of Dylan Gabriel. The Browns wanted to lose games, so they put Dylan Gabriel in. They were like, we need to lose games, and they're putting him in there.
How close
Yeah.
are we to Shador, you think?
I mean, I don't. To me, it depends. So, what we would need, that information that we would need to know is, do they think Shador is better than Dylan Gabriel or worse? If they think he's better, we're probably pretty far away from Shador. Like, I think there's a tank off going on in the NFL right now. You know what I mean? I think all these teams are trying to pretty consciously. I think the Jets, I think the Saints, and I think the Browns are all trying to tank their season, like consciously making the decision. I was seeing some rumblings from the scouting community that they think this is the greatest draft in NFL history coming up. They think it will go down as the most transformative group of rookies to ever come into the NFL. So if they think that, and these teams think they can get, they have these clustered picks they've been trading, and then they're going to be toward the top of the second round, it's really valuable to tank this year. I wonder if that's why we're seeing for the first time what I would call pretty blatant tanking behavior. So I don't know. What do you think the Browns want to win games at this point? There's no way, right? There's no way that they wouldn't have gotten rid of Flacco if they actually wanted to
Well,
win games.
yeah, getting rid of Flacco, I think, is an organizational like, hey, we would prefer not to win games here. Let's see what we have in the rookies, right? The Browns started doing it very early with like getting Isaiah Bond more involved. Harold Fannon's been a piece, Quinshon's been a piece, right? This whole season for the Browns has just been let's see what we have with our rookies. At the end of the day, the players play the games, right? They still want to win.
Of
So I don't know. I kind of forgot how important this game is going to be in terms of like who will have the number one
oh,
overall pick, right? Like neither of
oh my
these teams
god,
probably want to win this game like from the front office or whatever, but
no way. Do you remember the Texans? The Texans, was it Texans? Were they against the Panthers that week, or was it that the
oh, it was
Panthers
the
won?
Bears. It was the Texans and Bears.
The Davis Mills 4th and 17 or whatever conversion where they accidentally won the game, and it ended up swinging. Bryce Young would have been a Texan, and C.J. Stroud would have gone to the Panthers if Davis Mills doesn't convert a 4th and 17 and throw a touchdown to win the game. Like, think about like the spin-offs of NFL hit, and then CJ Stroud goes to the Texans. They go to the playoffs, whatever, 2 or 3 years in a row after he goes there. Bryce Young struggles. Dude, like the NFL fundamentally was like permanently altered on the basis of two garbage teams winning when they shouldn't have. So yeah, it's a big game. We might be laughing about that come draft time, right? What if one of the quarterbacks hits and the other one doesn't? It's really interesting.
Yeah, Texans fans ought to give Lovie Smith some thanks for that one. I know they were
Yep.
upset at the time, but look how that turned out.
Yes, sir.
All right, this one is me. We got the New Orleans Saints, led by Tyler Shuck, going to visit my second team, the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to be eating some crow. That's fine though. I'll do it. I'm man enough to admit when I was wrong. The Saints have an implied team total of 17 points, and the Panthers have an implied team total of 22 and a half points. I think this will be the largest margin the Panthers are favored by all year. But hey, if they win this game, they go to 6-4, which is hilarious. For the Saints, we're going to start Chris Olave, the last man standing, and Juwan Johnson. And we're going to tricky decision Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill. This is the first week, boys, that we're saying, hey, you could think about it. I would assume Taysom Hill is available everywhere. If you want to be the scumbag, if you want to be the guy who rolls him out, I think it's fine. I think you might actually have a good one. Then for the Panthers, we're starting Tet McMillan. Rico Dowdle is a smash start, and yeah, suck it, Ted. What an idiot. I totally misread this backfield. And we're going to sit Chuba Hubbard and Bryce Young. And let's just start with Carolina, right? Like, it's been a talking point of the fantasy community for weeks now. Weeks. It's been a week-long conversation. As it turns out, Rico Dowdle is now the centerpiece of the Carolina Panthers offense. Chuba Hubbard is getting paid $32 million over the next 4 years to sit in the cuck chair for Rico. It is what it is. And at this point, man, I think Rico is probably a running back one to running back two. Like, he's on that borderline for the rest of the season. Like, if he's going to be the entire engine of the offense, especially against the Saints, I think he's in for a top 10 week, would be my guess. He did pop up with a quad injury. Dave Canales said it's like just a rest day, and they're counting on him this week. So running back one for me this week. Chuba at this point is now a fancy handcuff. Big fat L for me. Tet McMillan is going to be a start. This is more so picking your spot against the New Orleans Saints than anything else. Again, I've said it a million times this year. I think it bears repeating, though. Tet McMillan is a far better real life player than a fantasy asset at this point in time. It's just been unreliable volume from the quarterback. And when the Panthers are having success running the ball, they're like a super rush heavy team. They'll give Rico 30 carries if they need to in a game. I think it's to help Bryce. I think it just protects the team a little bit. To me, Tet McMillan, though, against a bad Saints offense or Saints defense, they got a wide receiver two to a flex
Yeah.
option for me this week. I think it's fine. And then Bryce, at this point, like, he's a drop for me probably in fantasy. I think I've seen enough. If the Panthers are struggling in a game and chasing a lead, Bryce Young is not very good at that. If the Panthers are in a game and winning the football game, they'll run it a million times. I just don't see Bryce Young's like, I don't see the upside in the play. Like, I would prefer to roster guys like Michael Penix, Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold. I don't know, like anything that's like has just an iota of upside at the quarterback position. I would prefer that over Bryce at this point. For the Saints, I mean, they just traded Rashid Shaheed. It feels like they would have traded Kamara if you didn't say I will retire if you trade me. It's a very blatant tank, I feel like. That being said, though, Chris Olave is now the no questions asked number one pass catching option on this team. The Panthers, I called them a fake good defense. He's going to get the J.C. Horn matchup, but it feels like they will just funnel a bunch of targets Chris Olave's way. How much that's worth, I'm not super sure from Tyler Shuck, but to me, like, totally comfortable with flexing Chris Olave here in a pretty good matchup for the Saints. Juwan Johnson as well. Part of his issue, right, when he kind of fell off a little bit after the first 2 weeks is they were just getting Chris Olave a little bit more involved. When Rashid Shaheed came back, he was getting more involved. Now you remove one mouth to feed from the offense, and I feel like Jawan Johnson starts to just get more of those targets. Right, his fantasy value to me is entirely reliant on his target volume, because he's not. Usually his targets aren't worth that much, right? That targets just aren't worth as much on the New Orleans Saints, so he really is a volume play. It feels like with Shaheed being out of town, the Saints are probably trailing in the game. Shuck's gonna have to throw it. He's the easy button on the offense. I think he's fine. He's like a back end tight end one this week. Then for the tricky decisions, Alvin Kamara. Yikes, man. I think what was it last week, Yanni? Point two fantasy points.
Point two.
Point two. I don't know, man. Like with Kendre Miller being out for the season, right? You would think that, hey, Kamara is the centerpiece of the offense here, but it has just really amounted to nothing. The Saints have shown an inability to run the ball. They're down constantly, so they aren't like, running to milk clock particularly. Kamara's target share is down. He's averaging like 2 or 3 targets a game. It's just not at all what we drafted, not at all what we expected. This is about as easy as a matchup gets, and the best we can do is tricky decision for you here. Like, I don't know, man. I saw on fantasy shows that Kamara was a drop candidate for some people. That seems insane, given the name brand value here, but in bell cow for the New Orleans Saints, what's it worth? Might not be very much. And then Taysom Hill, tricky decision. The theory here is with Rashid Shaheed being out of town, right? The Saints are going to try and score points somehow. Taysom Hill had 4 carries last week for 30 yards. So he was pretty effective on his touches that he got. I think we're totally live here for some like a Taysom Hill goal line touchdown, especially if Kamara's not playing well. Like I think that God, coach of the Saints, Yanni. I'm stupid.
Kellen Moore.
Yeah, Kellen Moore. I think Kellen Moore is going to be more than willing to give him work, high value touches. Like it's like a cheeky play to me, but I think you could do worse at the tight end position given how tough it is. What do you think, man? I'm embarrassed I forgot Kellen Moore's name because he's such a G, dude. He's actually a very good coach, I think.
Dude, I've been doing this thing where, like I told you, and I know you're working full time too. It's like when I get to midweek, there's so much information in my head that I blank on some of these names. I don't have the encyclopedic name referencing that I have, like if I'm just sitting around or whatever. It happens. So I had Kamara. You and I actually, you said we drafted Kamara. It wasn't the player we drafted. You and I stayed away from Kamara this year. That was a really big like flag plant of our podcast in general. We were kind of making fun of guy, and I understood why you drafted him. I ended up with 0 shares in redraft, and I don't think I maybe took a 5th round, 6th round turn, 1 or 2 over 45 best ball rosters. Did you end up with any?
So I drafted 1 share of Kamara, and then I traded him in week 3. I packaged him with AJ Brown to get Jamar Chase and Trevion Henderson. I gave up a little draft capital to get that done, but I got out quickly because
Right.
the other team was like interested in that, and then the other team immediately traded him. So I was happy to get out of that business.
So I got, and it was because I had Cam Skattebo on the bench at the time, but I had that trade where I traded Javonte Williams, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts. Javonte Williams, AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts, and I traded for Lamar, Puka, and Kamara. So really, all I was interested was in Lamar and Puka, and I was giving up an RB1 to get that upgrade. But to me, that was so valuable, it was worth it, right? And like I've had Kamara just sitting on a bench, and like I've had to emergency flex him, watching him. Dude, it's like bad. It's really, really bad as a fantasy asset. Like I can't imagine if that was like your 3rd or 4th round pick, how that must feel. So yeah, man, it's a bummer. One of the coolest fantasy assets in the history of fantasy to me, like ever. Just one of the most fun. Like I was going against him that week that against the Vikings when he had like whatever it was, 6 or 7 touchdowns. Like it's just really cool. It is an end of an era to me, and that is a bummer. But I think it's the end. Okay, Bills at Dolphins. God, this one will be easy. Bills with an implied team total of 29.5. Dolphins with an implied team total of 20 at home. Should be a nice weather game. Let old Josh there air it out. For the Bills, you're starting Josh Allen. We're starting Josh Allen every week. I have a roster that is one of my most hated rosters like I've ever drafted, but it has Jamar Chase, Josh Allen, Pickens, and Kincaid, and somehow that has been carrying me. There's nothing else on that roster that's carried me to 6-3 and like top 3 in scoring. So Josh has been balling. Love you, buddy. Thank you. You've been doing work, and so is Kincaid. So if you're a Kincaid truther like me and Ted have been since his rookie year, really, like that was someone that we were taking some shots on over both last year, the year before, and this year. Like you have to be thrilled. To me, what you were hoping was he gets this move tight end, big slot, power slot role. Like he's really gotten that, and then he's gotten a prominent red zone role this year. Like I'm truly excited about what Kincaid could be moving forward. They didn't add a wide receiver at the deadline. Like to me, it looks very clearly like Kincaid and Shakir are their 2 best receiving options in this offense. It does not look like Keon's going to make the jump into an NFL level player. So you're going to go ahead and start Kincaid. You're going to go ahead and start Shakir. I know the Dolphins have actually sneakily been a top 5 offense in fantasy production allowed to wide receiver. To me, that's more a function of they're letting up so much production to the running backs. The teams don't really have to pass. I still like Shakir this week. I just think he gets enough volume from Josh and he makes his own yardage with his feet. Like, to me, that's his go-to guy outside of Kincaid. And then Cook, obviously, it's so what it sounded like to me was that Cook was sore. He was banged up. What I did not like, so he finished the game and he took like multiple carries after they said the injury occurred. And again, McDermott used that exact phrasing. He was just a little sore this morning. What I didn't like, though, was that he included a foot. In the game, they noted that his ankle was banged up. Now they included a foot. That can mean a lot of things. For some reason, this has been the year of the midfoot issue. We've seen it all over. That was what Bucky Irving got flagged with at one point. But, Joe Burrow, Brock Purdy. There's been like other ones. That's not even it. There's been more of them.
Kyler. Can't forget Kyler.
Yeah, Kyler just went on IR with the foot. To me, I read it like Cook is going because they used the verbiage a little sore. But an ankle and a toe is not good. My feelers kind of went up, especially in a game where they probably can handle this one without him. If you're going to have to rely on your running backs, you could. Like, personally for me, if he was even close to questionable, I would be benching Cook. That's just what I would be doing here. So, I think you need to be aware. I do think Davis is going to be the one to own there. I know there's been some talk on fantasy Twitter about the Davis-Johnson splits. To me, that's because Johnson is a receiving back and Davis is not. But Davis is a good runner, man. When he played one game without Cook last year, it's off the top of my head, but I believe he went for like 122 or 152 and a touchdown. Like, he looked really good. And in his limited touches this year, he's looked really good. This is the Dolphins rushing defense. Give me the guy that's getting the first and second down work here and the goal line work, which I perceive to be Davis. That is who I much prefer. I know there's a split in the fantasy community. I don't care. I don't agree with it. Unless you think they're chasing points here, which how could you? And then, look, our outright sit, Keon Coleman. I love the guy's personality, man. He's a goofy dude. He maybe belongs like coaching high school football somewhere. He'll be talking about how he caught a touchdown from Josh Allen one day. But like, as far as a fantasy asset, as far as an NFL player, I think there's real concerns. They've been there since day one. He didn't separate in college. And if you don't separate in college, you're probably not going to separate in the NFL. And if you don't separate, you're living on contested catches or a low target volume. He's a decent contested catch guy, but I don't know what we're chasing here at this point. He's droppable to me. Like, I dropped him so I could put in Mark Andrews on my flex this week. Like, I just preferred I'll roll Mark Andrews over Keon Coleman. That's kind of where it's at. I dropped him for Travis Hunter, who then went on IR because of course he did. And I dropped him for Parker Washington. It's like those kind of guys. Just give me a guy with some real upside that I perceive as being able to really make it. Short of a Shakir injury, I don't think Keon will, and you're benching him this week. For the Dolphins, A-Chain and Waddle are your starts. Until Tua gets benched, maybe we'll reevaluate it. You're starting A-Chain and Waddle every week. Don't care. I know it's not the best matchup for Waddle. It is a good matchup for A-Chain. I believe the Bills allow the 7th most points to running back in fantasy this year. Should have to be chasing points, so I would expect a really nice target floor for A-Chain. He's still around 45-50% of his snaps are coming out wide since the Tyreek Hill injury. I expect that to continue. Ollie Gordon picked up a high ankle last week, so he's in line for maybe one of the better usages of any running back this week. I just don't know, with how badly I expect the Bills to be hammering on the Dolphins and with how bad Tua's looked, I don't really know if he's going to have that high-end running back one week. I'm not really expecting that, but his bad weeks this year have been 12 or 13 points. You'll take that all day from a running back, and his good weeks have been 20 plus, 20, 25. I think he's going to be more in the 14 to 15 point range if I had to guess. And then we're going to sit Tua. That's a terrible matchup, and honestly, I would rather never start Tua. I am very proud of the fact that for 1 week after the Lamar injury, when I streamed Tua for 1 week in 3 leagues this year, and it was the only week that I think he had like 22.3 or something like that. It was week 6. I'm proud of that, but never again. Never again. Tua should be relegated to the waiver wire now until the day he retires. I was going to say dies, but that feels a little serious. Like Romeo Dobbs was talking about, Tucker Kraft is still with us. So it was very somber. I was like, dude, calm down. And then your sort of tricky decision, Greg Dulcich. Always been a fan of Dulcich's talent. Always thought he was a good guy. He was in my DFS lineups for their primetime game last week or 2 weeks ago. I think it was last week. He got 6 targets, really healthy target volume. And obviously at this point, as old Theodore said, has put me out there. And I think I will produce fantasy points for the Dolphins. I don't believe him, but you get the idea. They seem to be perfectly happy to give their tight end 6 or 8 targets. They seem to be perfectly happy to feed their tight end in the red zone. Dulcich was getting some yards after the catch, finding soft spots in the zone. I actually thought he looked pretty good. If you need an emergency tight end streamer this week, or like you're looking at these guys off the waiver wire and you don't know, like, um, I prefer Slayton. I prefer Parker Washington. Those are both pretty popular waiver guys I've been seeing everywhere this week. But certainly, like, if you are looking at the Rashad Batemans of the world, or even like Rashid Shaheed, if you had been flexing him in New Orleans, I would actually prefer to start Dulcich in a flex this week. I would prefer to start Dulcich. He's in line to me with the Cleveland tight ends. I would prefer him over Zach Ertz now that Jaden's out of the picture. So, he's like in that range of not even, I wouldn't call him a high end tight end two, but mid range tight end two. I don't think he's anyone you need to run out and stash, but if you need a streamer, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, I think the best way to put it, right, he's a system tight end. Like, if we
Yeah.
saw what Darren Waller did at 32 years old, like as a part-time rapper, like I think Greg Dulcich is fine, and really the whole Miami team, right? Particularly H.A.N. Waddle and whoever is playing tight end that week. It's entirely propped up, in my opinion, by the Mike McDaniel scheme. I think there's a reason that the Dolphins want to ride him out for the rest of the year. I think it's like a tryout to see if the play calling is good enough to maybe justify keeping him. I think that ultimately it's probably doomed. But yeah, as long as Tua is in there, like I'll never start Tua, but I think Tua is massively important for the value of Achane and Waddle. That's really all it is. And until the wheels fall off this thing, I think Achane and Waddle will continue to be startable for sure. For the Bills, I don't really have anything to say about it other than I am begging James Cook to just miss this week, buddy. I love you. I've been one of your biggest fans all year. I've been one of your biggest supporters. Massive swing now. I have Ray Davis in 4 leagues now, and I'm playing a couple James Cook rosters. If you just wanted to sit this one out and rush for 200 yards against the Dolphins, just like Rico Dowdle did, I'd be very happy about that. All right, big game for me for fantasy. I have actually both of these quarterbacks on one roster. I will be tuned into this one. We got the New England Patriots going to Tampa to play the Bucks. Patriots are underdogs here. 23-point implied team total for the Buccaneers, 25.5. For the Pats, we're going to start Drake May. Hendo is making the start column for us this week, and Diggs. We're going to sit Terrell Jennings. I almost forgot his name, and the other wide receivers not named Stephon Diggs. And then we're going to tricky decision Hunter Henry here. Then for the Bucks, we're starting Baker. We're starting Emeka Egbuka. We're starting Rashad White. We had it as running backs. I went ahead and adjusted that, though. It looks like Bucky probably misses this week. Absolute dagger for me on my Bucky roster. It is what it is, though. DMP right after the bye, it feels like it is going to be White again. Then, excuse me, I'm going to start Kate Otten as well. We're going to tricky decision Tez Johnson, and we're going to sit the rest. And we'll start with the Patriots. So the Bucks pass defense pretty much all year has been pretty bad. They had a good week against the Saints, but it's the Saints. Drake May is playing, to me, like, I think he's a potential MVP candidate. I think Baker is too, actually, but Drake May's been playing at such a high level. He still accounts for like 70% ish of his team's yards. It just feels like this is a Drake May spot in Tampa where the weather should be nice. He's a locked in, probably top 5 option for me this week, given the guys that are on bye. Start him with full confidence here. And just for the record, on my Drake May and Baker Mayfield roster, I'm starting Drake May here instead. So I prefer him to Baker. Trevion Henderson's going to be a start for us. It was awful holding on to Hendo pretty much all year. One of the most frustrating fantasy assets drafted highly that you could have possibly had. By default, he ended up getting the majority of the work last week, and he was pretty good with it on a per touch basis. Jennings did vulture him at the goal line, but the idea here is that Henderson's going to be the primary back this week. He's probably going to get a lot of passing work, right? Because the Bucks are pretty good with Vita Vea being a snowplow in the middle. So it feels like if they're going to move the ball with the backfield, it's probably going to be on Drake May dump offs. To me, Henderson's totally flexible this week, maybe a low end RB2. And then Diggs, he's going to be a start for us. Kayshon Boutte went down, who was the other guy who's I think a very high value player in the Patriots offense. Pop Douglas popped off on a couple long catches, but really he's been super spotty. So it feels like Diggs is the most consistent member of the pass catching group. It feels like the Patriots are primarily going to throw the ball here. I like the spot for Diggs. Totally flexible this week. Sitting the other wide receivers, really the only super noteworthy one for me is Pop Douglas. It's just very risky business if you're going to do that, right? Totally possible with Drake May's efficiency on the deep ball that Pop Douglas gets another 50-yarder, but if he doesn't, you're probably looking at 2 points in your lineup, which is going to lose you a week potentially. So I would look other places. Apparently, so I do want to mention this as well. Mike Vrabel said that they're going to ask Kyle Williams to be like kind of stepping up his workload in Booty's absence. So speculatively, maybe you could add him as like a fifth end or wide receiver 5 developmental project on your roster just in case it's sticky. I think it's probably not though. And we're not chasing the points this week. It would be insane to start Kyle Williams here. Jennings, we're going to sit him because it feels like all that passing work is going to go to Henderson. Jennings is probably like the up the middle plotter guy, and it's like, maybe he falls into the end zone, but I would bet against it. It just, you'd be a psycho to start him here. Then Hunter Henry, tricky decision. The volume simply has not been there since his nice start, right? He had the two double digit weeks like at the beginning of the season where he was the tight end one, and then he's been like pretty much at 7 points or below the rest of the year. Maybe he gets more volume this week with Booty being gone. I'm not going to project that though. I think the deal with Hunter Henry is you're hoping for a touchdown, and maybe it's one of those weeks he gets 5 to 6 targets, but he's a low end start at tight end position for me. And I actually dropped Hunter Henry on one roster. It was a roster that was lucky enough to get Gadsden, so I was like, okay, Hunter Henry project's done. Then for the Bucks, man, the offense looked shaky for the previous 2 weeks before their bye, right? So coming off a bye, got our fingers crossed this thing's looking better. But Baker, to me, he's a start, man. The entire for the vast majority of the year, he's been really good. 2 tough weeks, but I feel like coming out of the bye, hopefully getting slightly more healthy. I don't know. It just seemed like weird timing stuff with Baker, weird, like just barely missing throws. I'm still going to start him here. He's more of like a mid range quarterback one to me, but it feels like this could be a back and forth, like pretty exciting game. And no Bucky, right? So I feel like the load is going to be on Baker here to get it going. Igbuka is going to be a start for us. Again, for the last 3 weeks, he's really been down as Baker's been down as well. But the Patriots, it sounds like they might not have Christian Gonzalez this week. I would expect post by rookie bump as well. I don't know how much more up you could bump Emeka Igbuka. He's getting like 10 to 12 targets a game without Godwin and Evans out there. To me, he's like a low end wide receiver one this week. I still like it. Rashad White, the Patriots give up the lowest yards per carry in the entire NFL to the running back position. But the good thing about Rashad White is he also gets the passing down work, right? So to me, he's like an RB2 this week with Bucky probably being out. Cade Otton is also a start. The theory here is Baker plays a little bit better. The Bucks have to probably pass more to move the ball, and Cade Otton has just kind of stepped up historically, where when the Bucks are missing guys, no Godwin, no Evans. I like it here. Low end tight end one. Tricky decision, Tez Johnson. He just looks like he looks like a pretty good player. Looks like he has juice out there. I think he had like what half PPR fantasy points against the Saints. Again, Baker wasn't very good there, right? So if Baker gets the bump up, if Baker plays better, I think Tez Johnson is live for double digits here. You could do worse for a desperation flex spot. What do you think, Yanni? Who do you got in this game, Patriots or Bucks?
I was thinking about that one for a pick. It does seem like the Patriots maybe have a little bit of an issue against better competition. Just a little bit, like obviously, because they're not like a loaded roster or anything. I think if they're getting 2.5 points though, I may be dipping my toes back in the Patriots well, right? Because you rightly were off of them at 5.5 last week, thinking that felt a little big. 2.5 feels pretty manageable, but I also just don't know if I really want to mess with this game at home. The only other note for me about it that I'm really interested to see, to me, it looked like Emeka Egbuka wasn't fully healthy. Those 2 weeks that he had the hamstring injury, like they could have just sat him for 2 weeks. He stepped up, right, and played through it because the team needed him. He was still getting separation, still could have had like a 25-point week because he's that good of a player. But I did think this was interesting. It's just a storyline that I'm going to watch going into it. The last 2 weeks before the bye, teams adjusted to like a 30 to 40% higher rate of man coverage versus zone. So there was a huge difference in the way teams played them up until the 2 weeks before the bye versus the 2 weeks where the offense really struggled. And it was the shift from zone to man. And there are now some pretty significant splits with both Baker Mayfield and Igbuka and just the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense in general from man versus zone. But to me, it's like I think Igbuka is going to start to torch man coverage if his hamstring's ready to go and he's fully healthy. That bye kind of came at the perfect time. So I'm not like flagging it as a real concern or whatever, but I am really curious to see after the game. And if no Christian Gonzalez is in there, maybe that'll affect it. Do the Patriots come out and run a really man-heavy scheme, and do we see Baker and Igbuka struggle again? Then it might be something that's like sticky that we have to pay attention to. The other thing is like once Bucky gets back in there, that's going to disrupt teams, right? That's going to disrupt how they're playing. The Buccaneers will have to play a lot more honest. Maybe it's that teams haven't been really concerned about the running attack for 2 weeks. I just think there's an interesting narrative there with the defensive shift we saw the 2 weeks before the bye. What do they look like coming out of it? And does Bucky coming back change it all anyway? And honestly, I think the bottom line is Igbuka is so good it doesn't matter. It's just an interesting thing I'm going to have my eye on. Okay, Cardinals at Hawks. Important game for the NFC West if somehow Jacoby Brissett goes up to Seattle and pulls out a win. Cardinals with an implied team total of 19.5, going to the Seahawks at their place with an implied team total of 26. The Seahawks do have one of the, I believe, the best home field advantage in the league when it comes to winning. Their defense is playing lights out. It's going to be a tough one. For the Cardinals, with Jacoby Brissett in there, look, MHJ and McBride, man, as it turns out, like it was a Kyler problem. One of the more interesting things I saw all summer, one of the most interesting like tidbits of content was Matt Harmon, reception perception. If you want to know what wide receivers are doing without the ball in their hands, that's the guy to go to. That is his specialty. That's what he does. He charts receiver routes all day. And he had this really interesting cover on MHJ in like July or June. And it was about how his by far best routes are in breaking medium range routes, the exact routes that Kyler Murray could not see because of his height. He couldn't see over the line, and what would happen is those are timing routes. You have to get in between the corners and the safeties or behind the linebacker. They're layered throws. It's a nuanced style of play that you have to get going when you're doing that. Kyler Murray could not see them and could not hit them in time, and that was his best route. What happens when Jacoby Brissett gets in there? All of a sudden, the medium routes are totally opened up for Marvin Harrison Jr. And what do we see? He's like a low-end to mid-range wide receiver one multiple weeks with Jacoby Brissett. That's not an accident. It's because they have a quarterback that can functionally run their system. Petzig's whole thing is play action, hit an in-breaker 10 or 15 yards out. Marvin Harrison Jr. excels at that. All of a sudden, man, like I don't want to be too dramatic. We'll see what happens. But like Marvin Harrison Jr. is back on the menu in a big way as long as Brissett's playing the way he is. Now, right? Mike McDaniel, Mike McDonald. Too many fucking McDaniels in the league. Mike McDonald. He's an excellent defensive guy. He's aware of this. If I can see it, he can see it. He will probably adjust. But I'm curious to see if this MHJ thing continues. To me, it looks like it very much was a Kyler issue. And speaking of a Kyler issue, McBride has more touchdowns with Jacoby Brissett than he did with Kyler in his entire career. As it turns out, you want to target one of the best players in the NFL in the red zone. Jacoby Brissett does that, and it's had really productive results. It'll be an interesting race here to see, does Bowers or McBride take the crown of number one overall in points per game when it's all said and done? I think it'll be a little unfair because Bowers played all those banged up games, but McBride had to play with Kyler. So, but curious to see, starting them both. And then we're going to sit the running backs. I just have no interest here. It looks like Trey Benson will be back next week. They opened up his practice window, but they are not going to activate him here. So it does look like he'll be back next week. That's cool. This was a bad matchup anyway. It's not really one where I would want to start him. And then the brisket, Jacoby Brissett. We are going to sit him. I believe he's been the QB3 since he took over the starting job. But I don't have any interest in doing that here, not against the Hawks at home. For the Seahawks, we're going to go ahead and start Darnold and JSN. Darnold with Rashid Shaheed now. Rashid Shaheed, under their current offensive coordinator, dominated in terms of yards. He only played like 5 or 6 games with them, but he was excellent. Sam Darnold throws one of the best deep balls in the NFL. Torrey Horton looked pretty good. Looked like he had a little breakout last week. To me, like Sam Darnold is one, he's on waivers in a lot of leagues. That should not be the case. But two, like I think he's gonna start to flirt with like weekly locked and loaded QB1 territory moving forward. I think the offense looks that good. The volume isn't there, but the touchdowns are. The efficiency's there, and now I think Rashid Shaheed really adds a dimension to this offense that could be really interesting. You also have Cooper Kupp coming back. I expect Sam Darnold to be extremely productive rest of the season, and this is a soft matchup. Go ahead and roll him. Not a soft matchup, actually. The Cardinals defense has been good. This is an average matchup, though, where I'm starting him. JSN, what do you say, right? Is he one of the best receivers in the NFL? I'm not sure. That's a really hard. There's a 3 or 4 guys that if you're going to climb over, you need to be pretty incredible. I've seen people saying he's the best wide receiver in the league. I think we just like saying things because it's exciting for a year. To me, there will always be this sort of physical talent difference between guys like him and Puka or Cooper Kupp in his prime versus Justin Jefferson or a Jamar Chase, or even like if you're just talking physical talent like an A.J. Brown. I think those guys have a really special place in like human physiognomy or physiology. I don't know if JSN can get there, but he might be one of the most skilled receivers in the NFL. His footwork, his route running, his hands, like he might be about as good. His routes might be as beautiful as anything I've ever seen in the route running department in my years watching in the league. And then we're going to sit Horton and Shaheed. Shaheed, I don't think he's going to get the volume to be a fantasy relevant asset here, and neither is Horton with Shaheed there. I'm probably just not interested in starting either one. I would rather roster Shaheed if I'm going to roster one or the other, and Torrey Horton becomes unrosterable for me. It's a bummer. I didn't spend fab on it. I had actually picked him up the week before, but I was like holding a lot of Horton when I heard that Kupp was banged up, thinking he might take the wide receiver 2 role. Now I think it'll be pretty clear. It'll be Shaheed and it'll be JSN out there in 2 wide receiver sets going forward. So you're going to sit both of them. And then your sort of tricky decisions. I think Barner's one of those tight end streamers that just, you need a tight end, you go to the waiver, you plug him in, you have a shot at 10 or 12 points. They're running tush pushes with him, like perfectly fine waiver wire fodder tight end. I don't know if you need to roster him, but if you're really hard up, you certainly can. And then the running backs, this pains my heart as Kenneth Walker is one of my favorite players in the NFL to watch. I've said that for years. I've disclosed that for years. I thought he would get the bell cow role this year before he got hurt. I was a little worried about it. I still took a couple shares where I could, thinking like his talent would win out. It just hasn't. It seems like the coaching staff has a penchant for whatever reason. They're Charbonnet guys now. Again, we can all sit here and guess. Is it because they want Kenneth Walker healthy for the postseason? Is it because they just decided they like Charbs more? Is it because Kenneth got hurt and lost his job? Is it because of this and that? We just don't know. You would need to know what they're thinking for that. We never will. All we know for now is Kenneth Walker is good for 12 to 16 carries in between the 20s, and Charbonnet is going to be good for the majority of the red zone work. If Charbonnet doesn't get a touchdown, he's probably going to disappoint. If Kenneth Walker doesn't get like 2, 3, 4 chunk plays and get you in the 70 to 80 yard range, he's probably going to disappoint. Both of them are flex-worthy RB3s in a pinch. That's really it. Plug them into your RB2 spot if you were hero RB drafters or whatever, and you've had them sitting on your bench, or you bought low on one of them and they're just sitting there. Like, they're usable. They're not going to dud on you. That's not that. And they're both live for a touchdown. Last week was actually the first time Kenneth Walker got red zone inside the 5-yard line carries all year. He failed to get in the end zone. Maybe that's interesting. Like, it would be kind of funny to me if the resolution to all this is they just start giving Kenneth Walker the bulk of the work. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but it would make me happy on like a spiritual level. But who knows? I don't know what they're thinking. Yeah, but 26-point implied team total. I think you could do a lot worse than starting Sharps or Kenneth this week.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about the Seahawks, right, obviously the Rashid Shaheed trade was like big news this week. It kind of reminds me that with JSN and Rashid Shaheed being there in Seattle now, it's like a budget version of Jefferson and Addison to me. So I feel like Darnold, they really kind of gave him the weapons that he's super comfortable with. I think it's going to be good for him. I'm not sure if like I'm locked in like quarterback 1 rest of season, but I'm definitely picking up Darnold if he's available. I saw a lot of teams dropping him. Actually, he's on quite a few waivers. If he is there and you're interested in rostering 2 quarterbacks, I think it's totally acceptable. Then for the Cardinals, if Jacoby Brissett has a good game here, I think that he is like number one. I think Jacoby Brissett needs to be picked up off of waivers on the off chance that he does have a good game here. It seems very clear to me that the Kyler Murray move to IR, that's not about his foot to me. That's about a legitimate soft benching. I think he's done in Arizona. which it's crazy, man. Another busted number one overall pick. See a lot of those. But yeah, Jacoby Brissett averaging like 23, 24 points since he took over the starting role. If he's good here, I think that you have a weekly starter potentially. As gross as it is, I don't know why it's been so different for him this year, right? We saw him on the Patriots, he was not good. On the Colts, he was not good. But apparently the fit's good here. I lost to Jacoby Brissett last week, actually. Bummer, but good player for sure. I think the Cardinals made the right decision there.
That's such a jarring sentence to hear in 2025. I
I,
lost to Jacoby Brissett last week.
dude, I needed under 19 points on Monday night, but it's the Cowboys. The Cowboys have just been this destructive force for fantasy for me this year. I just cannot escape them. All right, and I got this one. Yay. We got Jimmy and the Rams coming into Levi's to attempt to avenge their loss against the 49ers. The Rams have an implied team total of 27 points here, and the Niners have an implied team total of 22 and a half. I know this opened at 3.5, so the bets are already coming in heavy on the Rams here, but they're betting against a home divisional underdog. Who knows? Maybe the Niners can keep it close. I'm not holding my breath. For the Rams, it's the boilerplate. Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, and Kyrie Williams are going to be our starts for you. They're going to be our start. They're pretty much matchup proof to me. I don't see a situation where I'm not starting those four guys in any given week. Then we're going to tricky decision Blake Corum here. I'll ask you about that later. I think I might know your answer. Then for the 49ers, we're going to start Mac Jones here as a streamer. One of the most impressive games I've ever seen was Mac Jones against the Rams. The first time they played, we're willing to dip our toes in the water for round two here. Mac has been playing well all year. We're going to start Jawan Jennings. We're going to start George Kittle. We're going to start CMC. Then we're going to tricky decision Kendrick Bourne. And let's start with the Rams first. I feel like the Niners is a different conversation. Actually, you know what? It's so standard. I feel like I don't have to say anything that too involved, right? Matt Stafford, I believe, leads the league in touchdowns. He's like worked his way into the quarterback one conversation, which he hasn't been his entire career. But I would start him with confidence here against an extremely progressively more banged up defense in the 49ers. Devontae Adams at 8 touchdowns already. He's just been good the majority of the year, and he really took off once Puka missed some time. Kyron's at about a 65-70% snap share. He's ceding some drives to Blake Corum, but this Niners D line is so banged up, it doesn't matter. They allow a million rushing yards. Start him with confidence here. The only note on Puka, he popped up as a limited today with his rib issue. Sean McVay said that they were going to do a scan or whatever, but also verbatim, Sean McVay said he expects Puka to play against the 49ers. If Puka Nacua is playing, you are starting him. He is my fantasy wide receiver one. Maybe there's some JSN believers. I prefer Puka rest of the season. Then Blake Corum, tricky decision. Yanni, I'll let you take this. Is this because you think that the Rams are up so big on the 49ers that Blake Corum just gets more work here and a
Yeah.
blowout? Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of it. And just also, like, anytime the Rams have had a really big lead, that's when Blake Corum creeps into like the 40-45% snap share. And then the Niners rushing defense has been so vulnerable. Like, they gave up 5 yards a carry to the New York Giants. Nick Chubb and Woody Marks tore him up for like 150 combined yards in rushing and receiving. So yeah, to me, it's just more like a low end flex that if you need it, you can definitely plug him in this week.
Yeah. The Niners have just been so
Yep.
frustrating for me to watch this year.
Yep.
Um, we already talked about Mac. Like, he's been playing at a high level. Like, this Rams defense is pretty good. To me, Mac Jones is more of like a super flex starter, but I think you can do it this week with more of the weapons being back, right? At least on the offense. Jawan Jennings, Yanni, I'll let you talk about that actually. To me, he's like a borderline start to potentially sit, but Yanni had way more conviction on that than me. George Kittle, he has not really had that blow up week yet, but I feel like it's coming here. Now that he's back, I think he's going to be the focal point of the offense. I think he's live to get another touchdown here. It is a tough spot against the Rams. They're really good against the running back. You attack them in the air. They just traded for what's that guy's name? I forgot. They traded for the Titans corner though, so they're trying to shore that up. But if the Niners are going to score points and move the ball here, I feel like it's in the air. And then CMC, what a stud! A great draft pick in the first round. If you drafted him, I feel like a rushing under might happen here, but he's getting so much work in the receiving game, it doesn't really matter. Then Kendrick Bourne, it feels like he's ceding more of the opportunity to Juwan Jennings now that Juwan is back. But I mean, he went for 140 last time against the Rams. He was like one of the heroes of the game last time. He has the prior relationship with Mac Jones. To me, he's more of like a lower end flex, right? I feel like it's just Juwan Jennings that's the primary beneficiary in the passing game here. But if you're desperate, if you want to chase the points from last time, you could do it with Kendrick Bourne. What do you think, man?
Yeah, so I was actually pulling up while you were talking Juwan's two fully healthy games. So he was playing with 5 broken ribs, an ankle, and a shoulder injury for most of this year. He played 2 fully healthy games with Mac Jones. Right, so I'll put this one on me. If this thing goes south, Ted gets to roast me, and it's my fault, not his. But against New Orleans, he had 10 targets, 89 yards, 5 receptions, and a touchdown, 17.4 half PPR. And then last week, he had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 41 yards, and a touchdown. So for 12.1 points. So he had, like 39.5 points in his 2 fully healthy games this year, which is, by the way, like a top 5, top 6 wide receiver. Now, it was only 2 games and we're cherry picking stats. We're throwing out the injury, right? That's all fair. To me, like when he's getting like a 26, 27, 28% target share, like he has the last 3 weeks in a game where they're going to have to pass a lot, he also has his best career game against the Rams. And like just in general, yeah, I don't know. He tends to eat against the Rams. That's like his thing. So yeah, I love. Like I actually have a really tough decision in a must-win league. It's one of the best rosters I've ever had. It's just gotten really unlucky with injuries. 3-6, and I'm struggling between Tetaroa McMillan and Juwan Jennings as my flex. So I think I'm leaning Tet there, but it's close, right? I think Juwan has monster upside this week. So put it on me if it goes south. He will be in my 49ers hub prop betting.
Well, if Ricky was going, I'd definitely start Tet. But it sounds like Ricky watch because I am a
No.
massive Ricky investor here. It
Yeah.
sounds like he's probably going to miss again. Shanahan came out at the press conference. He said the timeline is fuzzy, which is not good. He opened up with a DNP. It's a PCL injury, so we saw Puka miss 5 weeks with it last year. This is going to be week 5 or 6 for Ricky, so I'd be eyeing next week potentially. Full disclosure, I just made a trade. I traded away Omari and Hampton for Ricky Pearsall in one league, so I don't think you'll find a bigger Ricky believer than me. But it's not this week, I don't think.
Okay, Lions at the Skins. God, I keep getting games that are pretty straightforward. I'm not trying to be lazy and say there's not a lot to say, but there's really not a lot to say about some of these. The Lions with an implied team total of 28.5, going to the Skins with an implied team total of 20. For the Skins, Deebo Samuel is still in that like sub 30%, but between 25 and 30% target range. They're going to have to pass a lot this week. He was kind of banged up. Looks like he's off the injury reports now. No Terry McLaurin. Even with Marcus Mariota, I do think you can go ahead and start him. I'm not expecting the same production out of him. It's why both of us have told you at different points this year to trade Deebo away. We were begging people to do it after the 4 or 5 hot weeks. I hope you did. But still, I think I would start him here. I do. It's close though. It's close. And then the Lions, it's such a diffused production from them, right? But we know a couple things about Dan Campbell. He likes to run up the score, even if they're beating the shit out of teams. He kind of just keeps beating them. We know JMO has been really noisy about not getting the volume he wants. He came out and had 14.5 half PPR points last week on the big. He had the big where he kind of pushed off the big play down the sideline. They were chasing points is my only concern there, but still, we're going to say JMO's a start. We're going to say Goff is a start. Laporta, Monty, Gibbs. It's funny we didn't even put Amon-Ra on there. I forgot, but Amon-Ra's a start. Start Amon-Ra St. Brown if you have him. Yeah, it feels kind of weird putting. So to us, it's always this, right? Is Monty a start or an emergency flex play? Well, that's about how much do you think they're going to be up? I think they're going to be up an awful lot in this one. I think Monty's totally live to go for 20 points here. He might get a rushing touchdown or 2. This is not the kind of game where they're going to lean on Gibbs heavily. It's just not. I know last week was really weird with the splits. The fantasy community wasn't happy. That's just kind of what you signed up for with Gibbs, right? He does not get that full RB1 workload. If he did, he would be the first overall pick. But here, I think they're going to be up enough that like I would smash Monty. If you have him in your lineup, like there are not a whole lot of guys that I'm starting over Monty. You're talking about like it's certainly top 15, if not flirting with RB1 numbers this week. And then Laporta and JMO. like I alluded to, I would rather not have both of these guys as starts in a given week. I just think the matchup's so easy. And like again, JMO's been really complaining that, or not complaining. There's just sort of been a narrative around his usage not being what they wanted. They extended him on the contract. This feels like the perfect game to me for them to try some stuff. Just sort of air the ball out to him, give him a few gimmies, design some things for him, and it seems like they'll hit here with how banged up the Skins are. This to me feels like a game where like Washington is just begging for just put us out of our misery, get us up 28 real early. That way we can kind of, they just run down the clock, get us out of here. I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty ugly, but I would be starting all my Lions, even though you run the risk of them getting up so big that either JMO or Laporta bust. I just don't think you can sit them here.
Yeah, very. This is live to be a pick on the gambling show for me, for sure. I know
Yeah.
Dan Campbell and the Lions burned us last week, but the Redskins at this point in time without Jaden are just not even close to what the Vikings have from a roster perspective. I really do like JMO this week. The offensive coordinator went to the podium and said that I failed Jamison Williams in the first half of the season, and he wants to get him more involved. Again, boomer bust player, but I think this is a good spot to try your luck on there. The Skins, I got nothing on, man. Just
Ugh,
totally lost season, man. The Redskins
ugh.
magic is gone. If you have Jaden Daniels, I don't think he's coming back this year. Why would you come back this year? I've been aggressively picking at the Jaden Daniels managers with my two quarterback rosters, sending insulting offers. I have one. No, I have one that's impending though. I have one trade offer sitting there, potentially to get Jameer Gibbs. All right, this one. I believe this is the Saturday night game, and I have massive fantasy bags on this game. Actually, now that I think about it, like I have almost every relevant fantasy player playing here. We have the Pittsburgh Steelers going to SoFi to play the Los Angeles Chargers. The Steelers have an implied team total of 21.75 points, and the Chargers have an implied team total of 24.75 points. For the Steelers, we're going to start Jalen Warren and DK Metcalf. We're going to sit the tight ends. If they were one tight end, I would be intrigued, but all of the tight ends, it's just too spread out. And then Aaron Rodgers is a tricky decision. Um, to me, he's closer to a start, but we're not going to tell you to full blown start Aaron here, because the Chargers have been a ride. Then for the Chargers, we're going to start Justin Herbert. We're going to start Lad McConkey. We're going to start Aronde Gadsden, waiver wire hero for one of my rosters. Then we're going to tricky decision Kamani Vidal, QJ, and Keenan Allen. And we'll start with the Chargers first because I this was one of the ones I actually pushed back on Yanni and like insisted that we change. Justin Herbert to me, like at this point, he's unless you have some really extraordinary circumstances, you're gonna start him. I think feel like rest of season. It just has been like such a pass happy offense, right? And he's been getting touchdowns. He's been throwing for a ton of yards, 40, 50 opportunities a game. It's about as fantasy friendly as you could get, right? Lad McConkey is within the top 12 wide receivers in points per game over the past like month. He's finally started to get used a lot more. It seems like he's starting to work his way up like the pecking order again. It was a weird start of the year, but it feels like the talent has won out. He's the guy that you want to start here. And quite frankly, right, the Steelers have had trouble this year covering wide receivers. Danny Dimes, like he turned the ball over a million times, but all of his wide receivers got home. Last week there was obviously the Bengals game where Jamar Chase destroyed the Steelers. They really had a hard time covering good wide receivers. And the Chargers have a pretty good wide receiver core, in my opinion. So Ladd is a great start for me this week. Gadsden, I just hope the usage continues, right? Ever since he's kind of gotten the nod to get more involved in the offense, he's gotten like 5, 6 plus targets a game. He's been really productive on those. He's like usually getting one or two long catches a game too. Like to me, he's like a mid-range tight end one here. The Steelers, like I said, the secondary has been struggling. That's where you attack them. It feels like stylistically a good matchup for the Chargers. Then we're going to tricky decision Kamani Vidal. It's tough, man. You're running. You have no Joe Alt, and you're probably no Mekhi Becton. You're going against a Steelers defensive line that features TJ Watt. It just feels like a tough ask for me. You could do it. if you flexed him, I wouldn't blame you for doing it because the Steelers have gotten got this year before, but I have a bad feeling about this without Joe Alt in the game. I'm far more interested in QJ and Keenan this week. This is all just trying to get in on the massive Chargers passing pie, right? I feel like this is going to be probably a pretty close game. So the Chargers, I think the Steelers are going to score, right? So the Chargers are going to have to throw a lot. I want these pieces. I probably prefer QJ to Keenan in this spot just because Keenan has only gone double digits in one of the last 4 weeks. I don't know though. I think they're both valuable. You could flex them if you need to. I think that's totally fine. For the Steelers, it's really interesting. There's not much going on here. Jalen Warren, he's going to be a start for me. He averaged under 2 yards a carry last week, but he got in the end zone twice. The Chargers have gotten gashed this year on the outside zone run. Jalen Warren's a speedy fella. I feel like they might get him outside here. I think he's live to have way more yards than he did last week. Plus, if they get down on the 1 yard line, they turn around and hand it off to him. Totally acceptable, like RB2 for me this week to flex option. You know, I think he's like in the top 12 running backs this year. I think on a points per game basis, he's really been much better than I was expecting. I have a Jalen Warren roster that missed on a lot of running back picks, and he's just kind of been a cornerstone of that roster, surprisingly. But that's just where we're at. DK Metcalf had a terrible game last week, but it feels like the Steelers are going to want to throw here. I feel like they should have some success indoors, right? Like it feels like maybe they'll. I feel like this is going to be a shootout, right? And I just prefer DK a little bit more in these spots. The tight ends, we already talked about it, right? If they were one guy, it'd be great, but they just aren't. And good luck deciding between Darnell Washington, the Muth, and Johnny Smith on a given week. Then tricky decision, Aaron. I feel like he's been good this year. Like for a 41-year-old quarterback who a lot of people kind of written off as sucking, not being good anymore. I feel like he's shown a lot. I feel like the Steelers should have some success passing the ball here. I have an Aaron roster that Trevor Lawrence is also on. I am starting Aaron, no doubt, over Trevor Lawrence this week. I think he's like more of a super flex option, but if you're desperate, you could. Thoughts on this one?
Not a lot. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, game I'm very much looking forward to, a rematch of the season opener in Brazil last year. The Eagles going to Green Bay. Eagles with an implied team total at 21. Green Bay with an implied team total at 23.5. For the Eagles, I mean, Goddard has been a tight end one. Hurts has been like a top, I believe he's been top 5. He hasn't been, I think maybe he's QB6. He's like right around there, and he has the easiest schedule for quarterback moving forward for the rest of the year. So he's just going to smash, I think. AJ Brown, Smith, Saquon. Saquon doesn't need a whole lot of explaining. I know this is the defense that allows the fewest rushing yards per game, but like Saquon seemed like he really got going before the bye, and then he unfortunately picked up a groin injury that it sounds like isn't serious, but he did start the week limited. If he doesn't go, you can totally plug and play Tank Bigsby. I don't care about the tough defensive matchup. I would still start him. I just think the Eagles' environment is too good to pass up. Devonta Smith is really like he had an exquisite 4 or 5 weeks before their bye, just going wild in your flex spot. Like he's the kind of flex that is just perfect, where or wide receiver too, where like he's going to have some floor games. That's going to happen, and his floor can be a little bit low. But like when he goes off, man, you're getting like a nice chunky 16, 18, 24 points out of your wide receiver two or flex. It's awesome. AJ Brown is basically like the fancier version of that, the bulkier version of that. Where like he still has a floor. It's actually been a little bit low this year, even a little bit lower than Devonta Smith. But like we saw them really move to commit themselves to AJ Brown, and like we saw his best plays of the game against New York before he picked up the hamstring injury. Like he looked like him and Jalen and the offense had really rounded this corner where they were going to be willing to feed him a little bit. To me, that looks like their most effective way to move the ball. Like if I were the Eagles offensive coordinator, I would have Jalen dropping back and bombing the ball left and right to Hurts and AJ Brown, or to Smith and AJ Brown. And this is a soft matchup from a secondary perspective. The Green Bay does not have a whole lot to offer back there. They can only cover one of them. To me, both of these guys are like high-end must starts this week. And that sounds weird to even have to say about AJ Brown, but I know that he's been sort of a contested fantasy asset. To me, like if that usage in New York was any indication of their direction moving forward, Like, I think he's totally live here to be a top 10 wide receiver for the rest of the season. The only issue is the usage. The issue was never A.J. Brown. It was the usage. And it seems like to whatever degree that message could get through, it did. Maybe the Saquon injury helps out a little bit. I just also think their running game has not been great this year. Their O-line hasn't been great blocking. They should also be a lot healthier out of their bye. So we'll get a lot of answers to kind of what we're thinking about the team after this week. I think I'm interested to see it as a these are fantasy relevant players. There's important guys. For the Packers, our only smash start here is Jacobs. We are never ever sitting Josh Jacobs. He's the man. I don't care that Philly's been a tougher rush defense, but not amazing. I'm going to go ahead and start him with full confidence here this week. I know he's been nursing a calf injury. They've been spelling him with Wilson a little bit, but he did not appear limited. I don't believe. I haven't seen him. I didn't check his injury report, but he was like limited, then going. I don't think he has a designation this week, so that's good. We're going to sit Watson and Golden. You have your Quinyon Mitchell matchup back there, who's probably going to take Watson as the X receiver. Golden picked up a shoulder injury last week and really has been really flat this year. He hasn't been able to get anything going. I think the loss of Tucker Kraft actually does affect the offense as a whole. He's kind of their safety blanket, their yards after the catch guy. He got him out of a lot of jams. Like, Jordan Love doesn't have to make the right decisions downfield or picking apart coverage as much. When he can throw a 10 or a 5 or 10 yard out or in, and Tucker Kraft can take it for 30 yards or 20 yards after the catch, that alleviates a lot of the pressure on this offense to run systematically and properly. Where like Jordan Love has to operate from the pocket, dissect the defense, make the right read to move the chains. That's not the case when you can dump it off. Jaden Reed is still out for this team, their other catch and run guy. I'm expecting a couple 2 or 3 down weeks here until everything kind of gets back on track and their offense is back on the field. And especially with Golden hurt, I have no interest in starting Watson or Golden. I am unfortunately in a situation where, due to buys and injuries, I will have to start Watson in a league or two. I'm not really thrilled about it. I don't expect much from him, but it's the way it is. Sit both of those guys if you can. Our sort of tricky decisions are going to be Love, Dobbs, and Musgrave. Musgrave has been a pretty unremarkable player. He's not even just a Jag. He's like a below average NFL player, but it seems like this is a team that really wants to throw to the tight end. They drafted Musgrave higher than Kraft. If you lost Kraft and you weren't able to get one of the bigger names on the waiver wire, I think it's fine to stash him. I just don't really know. I don't know what we're going to get out of him. I think if you were going to get something out of him, you would have seen it at this point. But he did have 3 catches for 34 yards after Kraft left the game last week. And then Dobbs to me feels like the most consistent receiver here. He feels like he gets the most work here. He just kind of does the most fundamentally sound stuff for them as a wide receiver. Christian Watson can run the crazy routes. You have Golden doing some like slot work or some of the deep routes himself. To me, it's just like Dobbs is sort of a steadying force. I think he is the most reliable guy in the receiver core. He's the guy I'm most apt to start week in and week out. So he's a sort of tricky decision for us as well.
Yeah. So for this game, right? This has been one of my. We've been doing this for years now with Jordan Love, or at least I have. I have been staunchly of the opinion that Jordan Love is not good enough to lead a Super Bowl run. I think this is going to be a tough spot for him now, right? You're missing probably your 2 best wide receivers. Romeo Dobbs, he just runs the most routes, right? Like, he's the most like productive fantasy asset. I don't think he's the best player though. I think Jaden Reed and Tucker Kraft are far better, right? I am shocked that the Eagles are getting points in this spot. If Jordan Love is elite, like everyone says that he is for some reason, it's going to be pretty much squarely on him. I feel like with the Jacobs injury, it feels like he's running at a little less than 100%. Big Jordan Love spot here in prime time. I cannot wait to see what happens here. If Philly just dunks on Jordan Love and he does some of the dumb shit that he did like last week against the Panthers, I feel like there might be a conversation on national television that happens about this player. I don't know, boys. I've always said he has the talent, but I don't think he's good enough. I saw Packers fans. This actually really insulted me. After the Steelers game, right? Like I saw this picture of Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love. And like they were like, "Oh, we're the luckiest fan base in the world to have this 3 times in a row." It feels like because Jordan Love has come after Favre and Rodgers, that like it was just in the stars that he was like this great player. We've seen flashes, like he has potential. Don't get me wrong, but I think he's far from an elite quarterback, far from the price tag that he commands. That wasn't really even fantasy. That was just my Packers diatribe. Philly money line here. All right, that's going to do it for us. If you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It helps the channel out. Question of the day for the audience. Is Jordan Love a good NFL quarterback? Um, I don't. I think that he has the potential to be, but I don't think he's there yet. What do you think, Yanni? Is Jordan Love good?
He's always been somewhere in that, like, when he has a ceiling game, he like plays like the quarterback 9 or 10. When he has a floor game, he plays like the quarterback 17, 18, and sometimes worse. To me, there's just like a really thick tier of guys that start to pile up around QB 11 or 12. And then it like goes all the way up to QB 17, 18. So he's just sort of in that, I guess what we've been using the term the blob all year. There's just like this blob of middling quarterback talent that isn't like premium talent, but isn't bottom tier, and he's sort of just in there, right? The problem is he's making $55 million a year. So, and like, dude, these next 2 weeks, Jaden Reed is his run after the catch guy. Josh Jacobs is his run without him having to do anything guy. Tucker Kraft this year has been the number one run after the catch guy in the NFL. All of those guys functioning the way that they do, what they do in effect is they take the decision making out of Jordan Love's hands. He does not need to sit there and read what kind of coverage is this, which guy's going to be open. I need to work to my second, third, fourth progression. Like, you don't have to do that as much when you could just check it down, or throw the route that you had planned for Tucker Kraft and he runs it like that. Dude, those options aren't there for him. Like, we will learn a lot about Jordan Love cognitively over the next week or two, and this is a tough one, man. This is a tough one to have to do it against the Eagles in prime time. So,
Dude, it's crazy, man. Like I was watching John Middlecoff, whose opinion I really respect, and
yeah,
Colin Cowherd, and what they were saying is, I think the Green Bay Packers have an identity crisis. They don't know what they are, and they should give the offense over more to Jordan Love. And I feel like maybe I'm crazy and I'm seeing things like that don't exist or whatever, or I'm just like some truther. And it's like, to me, what's happening with the Packers, they don't trust Jordan Love to make those decisions because of what he does. There's so much negative play that happens, right? I don't know though. I'm just a guy with a podcast. Who knows if I'm smart or not? But we'll catch you guys for the gambling show on Friday.